Emma Collins reached across the dinner table, took the wine glass right out of Daniel's hand, and set it down so hard the silverware jumped. "Say it again," she said, her voice trembling but refusing to break. "Say to my face in front of my whole family that no man alive would ever choose a woman like me." The room went dead silent. Her own mother looked down at her plate. And Daniel. He just smiled, that slow, cruel smile he always wore right before he twisted the knife. What nobody at that table knew, what Emma herself wouldn't find out for 3 more weeks, was that the quiet man she'd soon hire for $200 wasn't broke at all. He was hiding a secret worth billions. Before we go further, I want to hear from you. Drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far this story travels, whether it's a small town in Ohio or a coast out in California. And if you believe a person's worth was never meant to be measured by their waistline or their bank account, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and stay with me all the way to the end. Because the last 5 minutes of this story will stay with you a long, long time. Emma Collins was 30 years old the night she finally understood what her family thought of her. And it wasn't a stranger who taught her. It was the people who were supposed to love her most. It happened at her mother's house, the big colonial on Maple Ridge, where every Collins family dinner had been held for as long as Emma could remember. She'd almost skipped it. She'd stood in her own apartment for 20 minutes that afternoon, coat half on, keys in her hand, telling herself she was too tired, telling herself she had work, telling herself anything at all that would let her stay home where nobody watched her fill her plate. But she went. Because that's what Emma always did. She showed up, she smiled, she made herself small enough to fit in the spaces other people left for her. "There she is," her mother said when Emma walked in, and there was that little pause, that flick of the eyes down and back up. You're wearing that dress again." "Hi, Mom. I'm not criticizing. I just wonder if the black one might have been more slimming." "It's good to see you too." Her sister Chloe was already in the living room, glowing the way people glow when everything in their life is going right. Chloe was 26, engaged to a corporate lawyer named Preston, and thin in the effortless way that Emma had spent her whole life resenting and loving at the same time. Chloe threw her arms around her. "Oh my gosh, I have the biggest news. We picked a date for the engagement party. It's going to be at the Lakeside Club. Preston's father is a member, and everyone's coming. Everyone." "That's wonderful, Chloe. I'm happy for you." "You'll come, right? You have to come. I can't have my maid of honor missing the engagement party." And Emma had smiled and said, of course she'd be there, while a cold little voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Everyone's coming." Everyone. Which meant the aunts who measured her with their eyes, the cousins who'd stopped inviting her places years ago, and Daniel, because Daniel would be there. Daniel was Preston's business partner. Daniel had somehow woven himself into her family's life even after he'd walked out of hers. She found out he was coming to dinner that very night when she heard his voice in the front hallway, that smooth, confident voice she'd once thought meant safety. "Emma," he said, stepping into the room like he owned it. "Wow, it's been a while." "Daniel, you look..." He let it hang there the way he always did. That was Daniel's specialty, the sentence he never finished, the compliment that was really an insult, wearing a nice coat. "You look like you." Her brother-in-law-to-be laughed. Her aunt smiled into her wine. And Emma stood there and took it, because taking it was the only thing she'd ever learned to do. Dinner was worse. It started small, the way these things always did. Her Aunt Patricia asked if she was watching what she ate these days. Her cousin mentioned a new diet program, just in case anyone was interested. Her mother suggested helpfully, so helpfully, that maybe Emma should hold off on the dinner rolls. "I read that carbs at night just sit on you," her mother said, "especially at our age." "Well, at your age, dear." Emma put the roll down. And Daniel, who had once told her that she'd be beautiful if she'd just put in the work. Daniel, who had dated her for 2 years, and then left her the week she found the courage to say she loved him. Daniel leaned back in his chair, swirled his wine, and delivered the line that broke something loose inside her. "You know, Emma, I always felt bad for you," he said loud enough for the whole table. "You've got the personality. You've got the career. If you'd just, taken care of yourself, some guy might have actually stuck around." He shrugged all fake sympathy. "Let's be honest. A woman like you at your size, no man's ever going to choose that. It's just biology. I'm not being cruel. I'm being a friend." And that was the moment. That was the moment Emma reached across the table, took the glass out of his hand, and set it down hard. "Say it again," she said. "Say to my face that no man would ever choose me." The room went quiet. Daniel's smile didn't waver. "I'm just being honest with you. Somebody has to be." "No." Emma stood up. Her chair scraped back, and the sound of it filled the whole room. "You're not being honest. You're being small. And you've been small this whole time, and I let you, and I'm done letting you." She looked around the table at her mother, at her aunt, at all of them. "I'll see you at the party." "Emma," her mother started. "I'll be there," Emma said, "and I won't be coming alone." She didn't even know why she said it. The words came out of her before she could stop them, born from pure defiance, from 3 years of swallowed insults, and 30 years of shrinking herself into corners. But the second she said it, Daniel's eyebrows went up. "Oh, you've got someone?" And Emma, God help her, lifted her chin and lied. "Yes, I do." "What's his name?" "You'll meet him at the party." She grabbed her coat. She got out of that house before anyone could see the tears starting, before her voice could betray the lie, before her legs could give out from under her. She made it to her car. She locked the doors. And then she pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and cried the way she hadn't cried since she was a little girl. Great heaving sobs that hurt her ribs, that emptied her out. Because she'd just promised a room full of people who thought she was pathetic that she would bring a man to that party. And she didn't have one. She didn't have anyone. Emma didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, hating herself for the lie, and hating herself even more for the part of her that meant it, the part that wanted just once to walk into a room and not have people feel sorry for her. By 2 in the morning, she'd talked herself into calling Chloe and confessing. By 3, she'd talked herself out of it. By 4, she was sitting at her kitchen table, with her laptop open and a cup of coffee going cold beside her, and she was doing the most desperate thing she'd ever done in her life. She was writing an ad. She typed it, deleted it, typed it again. She felt ridiculous. She felt insane. But she also felt something she hadn't felt in years. A kind of stubborn fire. The ad she finally posted read, "Need a respectful, believable date for one evening, a family engagement party. This is a professional arrangement only. $200 for the night. Must be kind, well-mannered, and able to hold a conversation. No games, no expectations. Just help me get through one night with my head held high." She read it 4 times. Her finger hovered over the button. "This is crazy," she said out loud to her empty kitchen. "This is absolutely crazy." She posted it anyway. Then she shut the laptop, put her head down on the table, and finally slept for 2 hours, right there in the kitchen chair. The responses started coming in by noon. Most of them made her skin crawl. There were the ones who thought she was advertising something else entirely, and she deleted those without reading past the first line. There were the ones who wanted to negotiate the price up then up again. There was a man who sent 3 messages in a row that got angrier each time when she didn't respond fast enough. By evening, Emma was ready to give up. She was ready to call the whole thing off, to march into that party alone, or maybe not go at all, to just let Daniel win the way he always won. And then at 9:47 that night, a message came in that was different from all the others. "Hi, my name is Ryan. I saw your ad. I want to be upfront. I've never done anything like this before, and honestly, I almost didn't reply. But something about the way you wrote it stuck with me. Get through one night with my head held high. I understand what that's like more than you know. I'm not looking to make anyone uncomfortable. If you want to meet somewhere public, first coffee or a diner, Just to see if I'm the kind of person you'd trust to do this right, I'm happy to. No pressure either way. Ryan. Emma read it 3 times. There was no strangeness in it, no hunger, no angle she could find. Just a man being plain and honest. She should have been suspicious. Later, she'd wonder why she wasn't. But something in that message reached the part of her that had been aching for 3 days. And before she could overthink it, she typed back, "There's a diner on 5th called Rosie's. Tomorrow at 6, I'll be the woman who looks like she's regretting her entire life." He replied within a minute, "I'll be the man who's been there. See you at 6. Rosie's was the kind of place that hadn't changed in 40 years and had no plans to start now. Cracked vinyl booths, a coffee pot that never stopped a waitress named Dot who'd been there since Nixon. Emma got there 20 minutes early because she couldn't stand to be late. Took the booth in the back corner and spent the whole 20 minutes talking herself out of leaving. She'd almost convinced herself to go when the bell over the door rang and a man walked in. She knew it was him before he said a word. He had that same plainness. His message had a tired kind of decency you could see from across a room. Mid-30s maybe. A worn canvas jacket. Jeans that had seen a lot of laundry cycles. He looked around, found her, and something in his face relaxed like he'd been nervous too and was glad the waiting part was over. "Emma," he said, stopping at the edge of the booth. "That's me, the one regretting her life." He smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. "Ryan, mind if I sit?" "Please." He slid into the booth across from her. Dot appeared instantly with 2 menus, and a pot of coffee filled both their cups without asking and vanished again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Emma had rehearsed a dozen versions of this conversation, and now that he was actually sitting there, all of them abandoned her. "So," Ryan said, finally wrapping both hands around his coffee cup, "you want to tell me what we're actually doing here? And I don't mean the party, I mean why. Why does a woman need to hire a date to walk into her own family's house?" Emma opened her mouth to give him the short version, the polished version, the version that didn't hurt. Instead, to her own horror, the truth came out. "Because my whole life my family has looked at me like I'm a problem they can't solve," she said. "Because I have a sister getting engaged, and everyone's happy for her, and nobody's ever once been happy for me. Because 3 days ago, my ex-boyfriend told a table full of my relatives that no man would ever choose me. It's just biology," he said. And instead of proving him wrong, I panicked and told everyone I was bringing a date. And I don't have one. Because he's right. Because nobody ever chooses me. Her voice cracked. "So there it is. That's why." Pathetic right. She waited for the flinch, for the pity, for the careful, uncomfortable way people always change the subject. It didn't come. Ryan just looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Your ex is a coward." Emma blinked. "What? A coward? And I don't say that lightly." He turned his coffee cup slowly on the table. "A man who has to make a woman feel small so he can feel big, that's the weakest kind of man there is. I've met 100 of them. They're always the loudest guy in the room, always got an opinion about everybody else's life, and always terrified that someone's going to notice they're empty inside." He looked up at her. "He's not right about you, Emma. He's just louder than the truth." Emma didn't know what to say. In 3 days, in 30 years, nobody had said anything like that to her. "You don't even know me," she managed. "No," Ryan agreed. "But I know a person who's carrying something too heavy when I see one. Takes one to know one." "And what are you carrying?" The question came out before she could stop it, and she saw something shift in his face, a shadow quickly covered. "That's a longer story," he said. "And it's your $200 we're spending, so we should probably talk about the job." "Right." Emma sat up straighter, grateful for the retreat to safer ground. "The job. Okay. It's Saturday night, 7 o'clock, the Lakeside Club, my sister's engagement party. There'll be about 100 people there, family, my sister's fiance's family, some of his business colleagues. It's fancy. Will you have something to wear?" I'll manage a suit. I can pay for... You won't be paying for a suit. 200 like the ad said. That's it. His tone left no room to argue. What do you need me to do? Just be there. Stand next to me. Be believable. She laughed, but it came out shaky. Be someone who would actually choose to be with me. That's the hard part. That's not the hard part, Ryan said. That's the easy part. She looked at him. Emma. He leaned forward, forearms on the table. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it, because I don't think anyone's told you in a long time. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes, I've watched you be honest when it was hard. Funny when you were hurting and kinder to a stranger than most people are to their own families. There is nothing about you that a good man would have to pretend to be proud of. He held her eyes. The problem was never you. The problem was that you kept handing your worth to people who were determined to spend it. Emma had to look away, out the window, at the passing cars, at anything that wasn't his face, because if she kept looking at him, she was going to cry in a diner in front of a man she'd known for 10 minutes, and she'd cried enough this week. You're good at this, she said when she could trust her voice. The fake boyfriend thing. You should charge more. Ryan laughed a low, surprised laugh like it caught him off guard. First time, beginner's luck. Why'd you answer the ad, really? He was quiet for a moment. Dot came by and refilled cups nobody had emptied. Somewhere behind the counter a radio played something old and soft. I lost my wife a few years back, Ryan said finally. Cancer. It was fast, which everyone kept telling me was a mercy, and I wanted to hit every single person who said it. He turned the cup again, that slow habit. We had a daughter, Lily. She was 3 when her mom died. She's 7 now. And for a long time after, I don't know how to explain it. I stopped being a person. I was just a machine that kept Lily fed and got her to school and read her stories at night, and inside I was just gone. I'm so sorry, Emma said, and meant it more than she'd ever meant those words. The reason I'm telling you, Ryan went on, is that after Sarah died, everyone in my life started treating me like I was made of glass. Or worse, like I was a problem to be managed. People I thought were friends looked at me and saw a sad story instead of a man. And I got so tired of being the thing people felt sorry for. He looked at her. So when I read your ad, that line about wanting to hold your head up for one night, I understood it in my bones. I know exactly what it costs to walk into a room full of people who've already decided who you are. He shrugged. I figured if I could help you do that even once, it'd be worth more than $200 to me. That's the truth. Emma sat with that for a long moment. We're a couple of sad cases, aren't we? She said softly. Maybe. He smiled. Or maybe we're 2 people who got knocked down and are still getting up. There's a difference. Sad. They talked for 2 more hours. They talked about things that had nothing to do with the job. Emma found out that Ryan's daughter Lily was obsessed with dinosaurs and could name 40 of them, and got genuinely offended when adults called a pterodactyl a dinosaur. She found out that Ryan actually cooked from scratch because Sarah had taught him before she got sick, and it was one of the ways he still felt close to her. She found out he was quieter than he seemed, that he chose his words carefully, that he listened in a way almost nobody listened any more fully, with his whole attention, like what she said mattered. Ryan found out that Emma was a marketing director, that she'd built her whole department from nothing, that she was brilliant at her job and terrible at believing it. He found out she painted badly and happily on weekends. He found out she laughed with her whole body when she forgot to be self-conscious, and that she forgot to be self-conscious more and more the longer they sat there. What Emma didn't find out, what Ryan didn't tell her, was the rest of it. He didn't tell her that the technology consulting he vaguely mentioned was in fact a company he'd founded in his 20s. He didn't tell her that the company now had 4,000 employees and offices in 6 cities. He didn't tell her that 3 years ago, when Sarah died, he'd walked away from the CEO chair and handed day-to-day control to a board he was beginning to regret trusting. He didn't tell her that his name, Ryan Walker, was one that half the people at that engagement party would recognize the second they heard it, because it had been on the cover of magazines, because he was worth more money than most of the people in her family would earn in 10 lifetimes combined. He didn't tell her, and he told himself it was because it didn't matter. Because for the first time in 3 years, someone was talking to him like he was just a man, just Ryan, a widower with a canvas jacket and a 7-year-old and a heart that had been broken and was slowly, painfully learning to beat again. He didn't want to lose that. Not yet. Not even for the truth. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said near the end when the coffee had gone cold, for the 4th time, and Dot had started giving them the look that meant she wanted to close. "Sure." "Why do you dress like that?" She winced. "That came out wrong. I just mean you talk like someone who's done well for himself. But you look like a guy who buys his clothes at the same place he buys his motor oil." Ryan grinned. "I was going to say something nicer." "You can say it. It's fine." He looked down at his worn jacket, then back at her, and something in his expression turned almost wistful. "Let's just say, I spent a big part of my life around people who cared a lot about the label on your jacket and not much about the person wearing it. And at some point, I decided I didn't want to be one of them anymore." He shrugged. "The jacket's honest. I know exactly what it's worth. Can't always say that about people." Emma didn't fully understand what he meant. She filed it away as one of the small mysteries of this strange, kind man, and she let it go. "So," she said, "Saturday, 7 o'clock, the Lakeside Club. Are you in?" Ryan held out his hand across the table. "I'm in," he said. "One condition." "What?" "When we walk in there, you don't shrink. Not once. Not for your mother, not for your ex, not for anybody. You promised those people you weren't coming alone. So don't come alone and don't come small. You walk in there like you own the place. Deal." Emma looked at his outstretched hand. For 30 years, she'd made herself smaller. She'd learned to fold herself into corners to apologize for the space she took up, to accept the smallness other people assigned her, because it was easier than fighting for more. And here was a stranger, a man she'd hired for $200, asking her to do the one thing she'd never once been able to do. She took his hand. "Deal," she said. "Jeh." The days between the diner and the party moved strangely. Emma found herself thinking about Ryan more than made any sense. She'd catch herself in the middle of a meeting half remembering something he'd said. She'd reach for her phone to text him something funny that had happened, then stop herself, because that wasn't the arrangement, was it? He wasn't her friend. He was a service she'd purchased. It was important to remember that. She reminded herself of it constantly, which should have told her something. He texted her twice. Once to confirm the address. Once the night before, a single line. "Remember, head up. R." She looked at it for a long time before she went to sleep. Ryan, for his part, told himself the same lies Emma was telling herself. That this was a favor. That it meant nothing. That the reason he found himself thinking about a marketing director with a shaky laugh and a mountain of unearned shame was simple human sympathy and nothing more. Then Lily caught him ironing a shirt on Friday night. "Daddy, why are you dressed up?" She was in her dinosaur pajamas, hair a wild tangle, watching him from the doorway with the frank suspicion only a 7-year-old can manage. "I'm going to a party tomorrow, Bug. Grown-up party." "Whose party?" "My friend's sister's party." Lily narrowed her eyes. "You don't have friends." Ryan laughed. "Ouch, thanks. I mean, you don't go places. You just stay here with me and make dinner and be sad." She said it simply the way children say devastating things. "Are you going to be sad at the party too?" Ryan set the iron down. He crossed the room and crouched down to her level, and he looked at his daughter. Sarah's eyes, Sarah's stubborn chin, and something in his chest ached and lifted at the same time. "No bug," he said. "I don't think I'm going to be sad at this party. I think I'm going to help a friend feel less sad. That's a good thing to do, isn't it?" Lily considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Is your friend a girl?" "She is." "Is she nice?" Ryan thought about a woman in a back booth at Rosie's telling him the ugliest thing about herself, and then worrying that he was a couple of sad cases too. Being honest when it was hard. Kinder to a stranger than most people were to their own families. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She's the nicest person I've talked to in a long time." Lily nodded slowly, filing this away in whatever mysterious ledger children keep. Then she yawned. "Okay. But you have to read me 2 dinosaurs tonight because you're leaving me tomorrow." 2 dinosaurs, deal. He read her 3, and that night after she was asleep, Ryan Walker stood in his kitchen, the kitchen where he still cooked from Sarah's recipes, in the modest house he'd bought precisely because it looked like nobody's idea of where a billionaire would live, and he admitted something to himself that scared him more than any boardroom ever had. He wasn't dreading tomorrow. For the first time in 3 years, he was looking forward to something. Saturday came. Emma stood in front of her mirror at 5 o'clock and nearly called the whole thing off. She'd bought a new dress, deep blue, elegant, the kind of thing she usually talked herself out of. She'd spent an hour on her hair and makeup. And now she stood there staring at herself, and the old voices started up, the ones that had narrated her whole life. "You look ridiculous. Who are you trying to fool? They'll all see right through it. They'll see the fat girl playing dress-up. Daniel will laugh. They'll all laugh." Her phone buzzed. "Ryan." "On my way. You've got this. Head up, remember the deal." Emma looked at the text. She looked at herself in the mirror, and she made herself say it out loud the way she never had before. "You are not a problem to be solved," she told her reflection in a whisper, then louder. "You are not the smallest thing in the room. Head up." Her voice shook, but she said it. The buzzer rang at 6:40. She took a breath, smoothed her dress, and opened the door. Ryan stood in the hallway in a dark, well-cut suit, and for a second, Emma didn't recognize him. Gone was the canvas jacket, the laundry-worn jeans. He'd cleaned up so completely that he looked like a different person, like he belonged in a different world entirely. He looked though she couldn't have said why. The thought crossed her mind, expensive. "Wow," she said. "I was going to say the same thing." He looked at her, and there was nothing performed in it, nothing owed. Just a man seeing a woman and being glad. "Emma, you look beautiful. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that because you're paying me. I'm saying it because it's true, and because I have a feeling you're not going to believe me, and I want it on the record before we even leave, so I can point back to it later." Emma's throat tightened. "You really are good at this. I keep telling you, it's not a talent, it's just the truth." He offered his arm. "You ready?" She looked at his arm, she looked at his face. "No," she said honestly. "But let's go anyway." "That's the only kind of ready there is," Ryan said. They walked to his car, a plain, sensible sedan, nothing that gave anything away. And as he opened her door for her, Emma had the strangest feeling. Like she was standing on the edge of something. Like the woman who walked into the Lakeside Club tonight was not going to be the same woman who walked out. She had no idea how right she was. She had no idea that in a few short hours in a ballroom full of the people who'd spent her whole life making her feel worthless, everything was about to change for her. For Ryan, and for a man named Daniel, who was at that very moment straightening his tie in a mirror and rehearsing all the clever cutting things he planned to say to the fat girl and whatever sad, desperate stranger she'd managed to drag along. Daniel was so sure of how the night would go. Daniel was about to be more wrong than he had ever been in his life. Emma got into the car. Ryan closed her door, walked around, and got in beside her. He put the key in the ignition, then paused and looked over at her. "Hey," he said. "One more time. What's the deal?" Emma met his eyes. "Head up," she said. "Don't shrink. Not for anybody. Not for anybody." Ryan smiled and started the car. "Then let's go show them who you really are." The drive to the Lakeside Club took 20 minutes, and for the first 10 of them, Emma didn't say a word. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring out the windshield at the road unspooling in front of them, and Ryan let her have the silence. He'd learned a long time ago that some people needed to talk before a hard thing, and some people needed to gather themselves. And you did more harm than good, trying to force the wrong kind of quiet into the wrong kind of noise. But at the 10-minute mark, Emma spoke. "Can I tell you what's going to happen tonight?" "Tell me." "We're going to walk in, and for about 3 seconds nobody's going to notice us, and then someone will. My Aunt Patricia probably. She has radar, and she's going to look at me, and then she's going to look at you, and you're going to watch her whole face do this little calculation." Emma's voice was flat, almost clinical, like she was reading a weather report. "She's going to try to figure out what's wrong with you, because in her mind there has to be something wrong with any man standing next to me. So she'll wonder, is he broke? Is he desperate? Is he not right in the head? And then she'll smile, and she'll come over, and she'll say something that sounds nice, but isn't. And what do you do when she does that?" "I usually apologize," Emma said, "for existing. I make a joke at my own expense before anyone else can, so at least I get to be the one holding the knife." Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel just slightly. "Not tonight," he said. "Ryan, tonight when your Aunt Patricia does her little calculation, you're going to let her. And you're going to smile back at her, and you're not going to apologize for one single thing, and you're not going to make one single joke at your own expense. Because here's what you don't understand yet." He glanced over at her. "People like your aunt, they don't actually have any power. The only power they've ever had is the power you handed them. The second you stop handing it over, they've got nothing. They're just sad people saying sad things in a nice dress." Emma was quiet for a moment. "You talk like someone who's been in a lot of rooms full of sad people in nice dresses," she said. Something flickered across Ryan's face. For just a second, Emma thought she saw a door open somewhere behind his eyes, like there was a whole world back there he wasn't showing her. "More than you'd think," he said, and left it at that. They pulled into the Lakeside Club at 3 minutes to 7. Ryan handed the keys to a valet, came around, and opened Emma's door. As she stood up, smoothing her dress, she felt the old panic rising up her spine like cold water, and she reached out and gripped his arm harder than she meant to. "I don't think I can do this," she whispered. Ryan turned to face her fully. He put his hand over hers where it clutched his arm, and his voice, when it came, was low and steady, and absolutely certain. "Emma, look at me. You already did the hard part." "What?" "The hard part was 3 days ago, in that dining room, when you took the glass out of that man's hand and stood up and told a whole room full of people who've spent your whole life making you feel small that you were done." He held her eyes. "That was the hard part. That was the bravest thing most people never do in their whole lives. This..." He nodded toward the doors. "This is just a party. You already won the war. Now we just go collect." And something about the way he said it, like it was already decided, like her winning wasn't a hope, but a fact. Something about it steadied her. She let go of his arm. She stood up straight. She lifted her chin. "Head up," she said. "Head up," he agreed. They walked in together. Emma's prediction was almost exactly right. For about 3 seconds, nobody noticed them. The ballroom was full. 100 people, maybe more, clustered in bright little knots of laughter and champagne. A string quartet playing somewhere in the corner. Her sister Chloe holding court in the center of it all, in a dress that probably cost more than Emma's rent. For 3 seconds, Emma and Ryan were just 2 more bodies coming through the door. And then Aunt Patricia turned around. Emma watched it happen exactly the way she'd said it would. She watched Patricia's eyes land on her, then slide to Ryan, then do that little calculation. She watched the flicker of confusion, the recalibration. And she braced herself for the smile that wasn't a smile. But this time, when it came, when Patricia crossed the room with her arms already opening, cooing, "Emma, darling, you made it, and you brought a friend." Emma didn't apologize. She didn't make the joke. She just smiled back, warm and easy, and completely unbothered. And she said, "Aunt Patricia, this is Ryan. Ryan, my Aunt Patricia." And Ryan took Patricia's hand and said, "It's a pleasure. Emma's told me you have a real gift for noticing things about people. She said you've got radar." Patricia blinked. For one glorious second, Emma watched a woman who had spent 30 years being the sharpest, cruelest thing in every room lose her footing completely, because she couldn't tell if she'd just been complimented or filleted, and the not knowing left her with nothing to say. Well, Patricia managed. That's how lovely. What is it you do, Ryan? A little of this, a little of that, Ryan said pleasantly. Right now I'm mostly a full-time dad. My daughter's 7. Keeps me busy. Oh, said Patricia, and Emma could see her filing that away, could see her adding it to the ledger. A single father, no clear career, dresses fine, but who knows? She could see Patricia deciding that this confirmed everything she already believed. That Emma had once again found the best she could get, which wasn't much. And 2 weeks ago, that look would have crushed Emma flat. Tonight, she just took Ryan's arm and said, "Would you excuse us?" "Aunt Patricia, I want to go congratulate my sister." And she steered them away before Patricia could sink the hook in any deeper. The moment they were out of earshot, Ryan leaned close. "How was that?" "You just complimented her radar," Emma said, and to her own astonishment, she laughed. A real laugh. She has no idea if you insulted her. She's going to be thinking about that all night." "That's the idea." Ryan was grinning. "You give people like that a little puzzle to chew on, and they leave you alone. Now, where's this sister of yours?" Chloe found them before they found her. She came sweeping across the room in a cloud of perfume and delight, and she threw her arms around Emma, and for a moment it was almost nice. For a moment, Emma could pretend her little sister was just happy to see her. But then Chloe pulled back, and her eyes went to Ryan. And Emma saw the surprise flash across her face, quick and unguarded, before she covered it. "Em, you didn't tell me you were bringing someone." Chloe's voice was bright, too bright. "And who is this?" "This is Ryan," Emma said. "Ryan, my sister Chloe, the woman of the hour." "Congratulations," Ryan said warmly. "I hear you found a good one." "Oh, Preston's wonderful. He's around here somewhere." Chloe's eyes kept flicking back to Emma, and Emma could read every thought going through her sister's head. "Where did you find him? Is he real? Is he actually with you?" "So, Ryan, how do you know each other?" Em never mentioned, and here it was. The question Emma had dreaded, the one she hadn't fully prepared for, the one that could unravel the whole night with one wrong word. But Ryan answered before she could stumble. "We met a few weeks ago," he said, and it wasn't even a lie, which was somehow the most disorienting part. Honestly, I'd tell you it was fate, but Emma would roll her eyes at me. Let's just say I got very lucky, and I'm still not entirely sure what she's doing with me. He looked at Emma, and there was something in his face that made her stomach flip, because it looked real. It looked so real she almost believed it herself. "I'm working on deserving it." Chloe's mouth opened slightly. Emma watched her sister, her beautiful, effortless, always chosen sister, look at the man beside her, and for the first time in their entire lives, be the one who didn't understand what was happening. "Well," Chloe said faintly, "that's Em. That's great. That's really great. Wow. Okay, I should find Preston. Come find us later, okay?" And she drifted away, glancing back once, twice, like she was trying to solve a math problem that kept coming out wrong. Emma exhaled slowly. "You okay?" Ryan asked. "That's the first time in my life my sister has ever looked at me and been jealous," Emma said quietly. I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything with it. Just notice it. Just let it be true for a second." Ryan grabbed 2 glasses of champagne off a passing tray and handed her one. "You've spent your whole life believing you were the one who came up short. Tonight you get to find out that was never the truth. It was just the story. There's a difference." Emma took the champagne. Her hand was steady. "You keep saying things like that," she said. "Like you know exactly how it feels to have everyone believe a story about you that isn't true." Ryan's smile didn't change, but something behind it did. "I do know how that feels," he said. "Better than you know." And once again, Emma had the sense of a door standing open somewhere just out of sight, a whole hidden room. In this man she'd hired, full of things he wasn't telling her. She wanted to ask. She almost did. But that was the moment Daniel arrived. She felt him before she saw him. That was the thing about Daniel. He had a way of changing the temperature of a room just by walking into it. And Emma's whole body knew the feeling had been trained by 2 years of it to go tense and small. "Well, well," came the voice behind her, smooth and amused. "Emma Collins. And here I thought you were bluffing." Emma turned around. Daniel looked exactly the way he always looked: expensive, polished, radiating the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of never once being told no. His eyes moved over Emma with that familiar flick of assessment, and then they went to Ryan, and Emma watched him do the same calculation her aunt had done, except Daniel's version had teeth. "So you actually found somebody," Daniel said, extending a hand to Ryan with a smile that was all challenge. "Good for you, Emma. Daniel Price. And you are—" "Ryan." He shook Daniel's hand. "Just Ryan. No last name, no title, nothing." "Nice to meet you." "Ryan." Daniel repeated it like he was tasting it and finding it thin. "And what do you do?" "Ryan, Emma didn't mention what you're into." "This and that," Ryan said easily. "Mostly, I'm raising my daughter right now." "Ah." Daniel's smile widened, and Emma felt her stomach drop, because she knew that smile. She knew exactly what came after that smile. "A stay-at-home situation. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. Somebody's got to hold down the fort, right?" He turned to Emma, and his voice took on that fake warm tone that was worse than open cruelty. "I have to say, Em, I'm impressed. Really. After what we talked about at dinner, I honestly wasn't sure you'd well. I'm glad you found someone who's, in your league. Somebody real. Somebody who gets it." The insult was so precisely constructed that it took Emma a second to feel all its edges. "In your league. Somebody who gets it." He was calling Ryan a loser. He was calling her a loser. He was saying in front of everyone that the two of them deserved each other, a fat woman and a man with no job, two rejects who'd found each other in the discount bin. 2 weeks ago, it would have destroyed her, and Emma opened her mouth not knowing what would come out. The old instinct to apologize and shrink already rising in her throat. But Ryan spoke first. "You know, Daniel," he said, and his voice was so calm, so pleasant, that it took a moment for the words to land. "I've been trying to figure out all night who you reminded me of, and I just got it." He smiled. "I used to know a guy just like you. Ran the loudest table at every dinner. Always had an opinion about everybody else's life. And you know what I finally realized about him?" Daniel's smile had frozen. "I'm sure you're going to tell me. I realized he only ever talked about other people's lives because he couldn't stand to look at his own," Ryan said. "The guys who spend all their energy sizing up the room and ranking everybody in it, it's never confidence, it's the opposite. It's a man doing math on everyone else because he's terrified of what the numbers say about him." He took a sip of champagne unhurried. "But hey, what do I know? I'm just a stay-at-home dad." The silence that followed lasted maybe 2 seconds. But Emma would remember it for the rest of her life. The sight of Daniel Price, a man she had never once seen, at a loss for words, standing in the middle of her sister's engagement party, with his mouth slightly open and absolutely nothing to say. Daniel started. "That's a real interesting theory." "It's yours if you want it," Ryan said pleasantly. "No charge." And then before Daniel could recover, before he could find some clever angle back in, Ryan turned to Emma and said, "I think I hear the quartet starting something slow. Would you dance with me?" Emma stared at him. "I don't dance," she said automatically. It was one of her oldest rules. She didn't dance. She didn't draw attention to her body moving. She didn't give people the chance to watch and judge. "You do tonight?" Ryan said gently. "Head up, remember?" And he held out his hand. Emma looked at Daniel. Daniel, who was watching, Daniel, who was waiting for her to say no. Waiting for her to shrink back into the woman she'd always been, because that would prove he was right. That would restore the order of the universe. She put her champagne down. She took Ryan's hand. "Okay," she said. "But if I step on your feet, that's on you." He led her out onto the floor, and the quartet was indeed playing something slow, and Emma became aware that people were watching her family, her sister Daniel, all of them turning to see the fat girl dance. And the old terror clawed at her. But Ryan put one hand on her waist and took her other hand in his, and he leaned in close so only she could hear, and he said, "Don't look at them. Look at me. Just me. We're the only two people in this room." So she looked at him, and they danced. Emma had spent her whole life believing her body was something to hide, something to apologize for, something that made her unlovable and clumsy and wrong. And now she was moving across a dance floor in a beautiful blue dress, in the arms of a man who looked at her like she was the only thing worth looking at, and for the length of one song, she forgot to be afraid. For the length of one song, she felt something she couldn't remember ever feeling in her entire adult life. She felt beautiful. "You're doing it," Ryan murmured. "Doing what?" "You're not shrinking. You're dancing in front of every person who ever made you feel small, and you're not shrinking 1 inch." His eyes were warm. "Look at you, Emma. Just look at you." And Emma laughed, and it came out a little watery, because she was close to crying, and it was the good kind for once, the kind that meant something inside her was healing instead of breaking. "I don't understand you," she said. "I hired you for $200. This is a job, and you're making me feel like—" "Like what?" "Like it's not a job," she whispered. Ryan didn't answer that, but his hand tightened on hers just slightly, and something crossed his face that looked almost like fear, not of her, but of something in himself, something he hadn't planned on and didn't know what to do with. The song ended, and the moment it did, the spell broke, because a voice cut across the ballroom, a man's voice, loud and surprised and delighted, coming from near the bar. "Wait a second, wait just a second, is that Ryan Walker?" Emma felt Ryan go still. It was such a small thing, but she felt it in the hand on her waist, in the sudden tension in his shoulders. For just a fraction of a second before he could hide it, she saw something flash across his face that she'd never seen there before. She saw him look for the first time since she'd met him like a man who'd been caught. A cluster of men in suits near the bar had turned around. One of them, heavy-set, red-faced, a glass of scotch in his hand, was staring at Ryan with an expression of pure astonishment, and he was already moving toward them, cutting through the crowd, his voice getting louder. "It is you! My God, I thought everybody thought Ryan Walker as I live and breathe." The man reached them, grabbed Ryan's hand and pumped it wildly. "I sat 2 tables down from you at the Technology Summit in, what was it, 4 years ago? Before you, well before everything. My God, man, where have you been? Do you have any idea the whole industry's been wondering what happened to you?" Emma looked at Ryan. Ryan was looking at the floor. "I think you've got me confused with someone," Ryan said quietly, but there was no conviction in it, and the red-faced man laughed like he'd made a joke. "Confused. Confused. Ryan, I've got your book on my nightstand. I've watched your keynote about 40 times. You're the reason half the people in this room have jobs." The man turned to the crowd that was starting to gather, his voice booming now, and Emma felt the whole party turning toward them like iron filings toward a magnet. "Do you people know who this is? This is Ryan Walker, the Ryan Walker, founder and CEO of Walker Systems. This man built a $4 billion company from a garage and then just poof, disappeared off the face of the earth 3 years ago. Nobody's seen him in public since. The word hit the room like a stone dropped in still water, and the ripples went out fast. Billion. Emma heard it move through the crowd. She heard her Aunt Patricia's voice somewhere behind her say, "Did he say billion, May?" She heard Daniel, who had drifted closer, make a sound that was almost a cough. She saw her sister Chloe's face turn white and then red. She saw 100 people who 30 seconds ago had looked at Ryan and seen a stay-at-home dad in a nice suit suddenly recalculate everything, and Emma stood in the middle of it in her beautiful blue dress, with her hand still warm from his, and she felt the floor drop out from under her. $4 billion company. Founder and CEO. Nobody's seen him in 3 years. She turned to look at the man she'd hired for $200. The man who'd shown up in a canvas jacket and laundry-worn jeans. The man who'd insisted on being paid exactly 200 no more, who'd refused to let her buy him a suit. The man who dressed like he bought his clothes where he bought his motor oil. The man who'd looked at her at a desperate woman offering $200 for one evening of dignity and had answered it. A man worth $4 billion had answered her ad. "Ryan," she said, and her voice came out very small. "What is he talking about?" Ryan finally looked up, and the look on his face, the guilt, the apology, the terrible confirmation in his eyes told her everything before he said a single word. "Emma," he said, "I can explain." But the red-faced man wasn't done. He was still going, still booming, oblivious to what he was doing, playing to the crowd that had gathered around them. "And who's this? Is this Mrs. Walker?" No, everyone knows Ryan lost his wife. God rest her terrible thing. So who's the lucky lady?" He beamed at Emma. "How does a woman like you land the most eligible bachelor in the whole country? What's your secret, sweetheart?" And that was when Daniel started to laugh. It began as a low chuckle, and then it built, and Emma turned to see her ex-boyfriend standing there with his hand over his mouth and his shoulders shaking, laughing like he'd just heard the funniest thing in the world. "Oh, this is..." Daniel gasped between laughs. "Oh, this is perfect. This is just Emma. Emma, you don't even know, do you?" He looked around at the gathering crowd, making sure he had an audience, because Daniel always needed an audience. She hired him. She has to have hired him. There's no way a woman like her with a guy like that. Come on. She probably, what did you find, some agency, Rent a Billionaire. Did you Google how to fake a boyfriend for your sister's party? He was joking. He was guessing. He'd hit closer to the truth than he could possibly have known, and he'd meant it as the cruelest joke he could invent, and Emma felt every eye in the room swing toward her waiting. And here was the moment. Here was the knife's edge. Because Daniel was half right and half wrong in exactly the way that could destroy her. She had hired Ryan. She had posted the ad, that part was true, and if it came out she'd be humiliated in front of everyone. But she'd hired a broke actor. She'd hired a widowed single dad. She had never in a million years imagined, "Actually," Ryan said. His voice cut through Daniel's laughter, and it was different now. Gone was the easy, pleasant tone he'd used all night. This voice was quiet and level, and carried the unmistakable weight of a man who was used to being listened to. A man who had, Emma now understood, commanded rooms full of people far more powerful than anyone at this party. The whole ballroom went silent. "Actually," Ryan said again, and he stepped forward and he did something Emma didn't expect. He reached over and took her hand, held it, in front of all of them. "You've got it backwards, Daniel. She didn't land me. I've been trying all night to figure out how I got lucky enough to be standing next to her." He looked around the room at all the staring faces, and his voice hardened. "And I've spent the whole evening watching every person in this room look at this woman and see something to pity or something to fix, including you. Especially you." His eyes came to rest on Daniel. "You want to know her secret? Here it is. She's the only person in 3 years who looked at me and saw a human being instead of a checkbook. That's the secret. That's the whole thing. And not one of you deserves to breathe the same air as her." Nobody moved. Emma's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Because it was beautiful what he'd said, it was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said about her, and it was also, she was beginning to realize, built on the same lie she'd built the whole night on. He'd defended her. He'd been magnificent. And he'd also just confirmed in front of everyone that they were together, that this was real, when the truth was that she'd found him in an online ad 3 days ago, and he'd been lying to her from the very first cup of coffee at Rosie's. He knew who he was that whole time. He'd sat across from her in that diner and let her pour out the ugliest, most desperate truth of her life. He'd told her his own story, his wife, his daughter, his grief. And he'd left out the one enormous fact that changed everything. He'd let her believe they were two broken people who understood each other. Two sad cases. when the truth was that one of them was a struggling marketing director who'd scraped together $200, and the other was a billionaire who'd wandered into her life like a tourist visiting the poor. The crowd was starting to murmur again. Someone was already on their phone. Emma could see it happening, could see the story forming the reclaimed billionaire. The mystery woman could feel the whole night curdling from her private humiliation into something that would follow her forever. And Ryan was still holding her hand, still looking at her, waiting for her to what? To play along, to smile, and let them all believe the fairy tale. Emma pulled her hand out of his. "Emma," he said, "don't." Her voice shook. "Don't you knew. This whole time. In the diner when I told you everything. When I told you the most humiliating thing about my entire life. You already knew who you were. You just let me sit there and in pity you. You let me think we were the same." "We are the same," Ryan said quietly. "Emma, that part was true. Every word of that was true. You're a billionaire." It came out louder than she meant it, and she saw the crowd lean in hungry, but she couldn't stop now. "You let me pay you $200. You took $200 from me, and you dressed up like you needed it, like you were just some guy. And the whole time you were, do you have any idea what it feels like to find out you were somebody's charity project? To find out the one person who looked at me like I mattered was slumming. That's not what this was. Then what was it?" Her eyes were burning. "You want to tell me it was real? A guy who could have any woman in the world, and he answered a fat girl's desperate ad for a fake boyfriend. Tell me how that's real, Ryan. Tell me how that's anything but the saddest, most pathetic. Because you're the first thing that's felt real to me in 3 years." He said it too loud. It broke out of him raw and unguarded, and it echoed off the walls of the silent ballroom, and 100 people heard the richest man in the room lose his composure in front of all of them. He lowered his voice, but it was still shaking. "You want the truth? Here's the truth. My wife died and I stopped being a person. I handed my company to a board I didn't trust because I couldn't stand to walk into that building without her. I moved to a little house and I bought clothes that nobody would look twice at, and I did everything I could to disappear because every single person who found out who I was stopped seeing me the second they saw the number attached to my name." His voice cracked. "And then a woman posted an ad. And she wrote one line, 'Get through one night with my head held high.' And I read it, and I thought, my God, she knows. She knows exactly what it costs to walk into a room full of people who've already decided who you are. And I answered it because I wanted one single time, to be looked at by someone who didn't know the number, who just saw me." He looked at her, and there were tears standing in his eyes now in front of everyone. "That's the truth, Emma. I didn't tell you because the second you knew I'd stop being Ryan and I'd start being Ryan Walker. And I have never in my life wanted to keep being just a man as badly as I did sitting across from you in that diner." The silence in the ballroom was total. Emma stood there, and the tears were running down her face now, and she was aware of every eye on her, aware of her mother, somewhere in the crowd, aware of Daniel, aware of her sister, aware that whatever she said next would be witnessed and repeated and would define this night forever. And the terrible thing, the thing that made it so much worse, was that she believed him. She believed every word. She could hear that it was true. She could feel it. And that was almost harder than if he'd been lying, because it meant she couldn't just be angry, couldn't just hate him and storm out clean. It meant she had to stand here in front of everyone and hold two impossible things at once, that this man had lied to her, and that this man had told her the truest thing anyone had ever said to her, and that both of those were the same man. "You should have told me," she said finally. Her voice was barely audible. "Maybe it was real. Maybe it was all real. But you should have let me choose whether I wanted to be part of your escape. You made that choice for me. You decided I didn't get to know the truth. And that's Ryan. That's exactly what everyone in my whole life has always done. Decided things about me. Decided what I could handle. Decided who I got to be." She wiped her face. I thought you were different. That's the part that hurts. I actually thought you were different. Emma. He reached for her. I need some air, she said, and she stepped back out of his reach. I can't be here. I can't do this in front of all of them. I can't. And she turned and she walked out of the ballroom. And this time the whole room watched her go, but she wasn't shrinking. That was the thing she'd remember later, the strange, painful pride of it. Even walking out with her heart broken, even with 100 people staring, she walked out with her head up. Because he'd given her that, at least. Whatever else was true or false about the night, he'd given her that, and it was hers now, and not even this could take it back. She made it to the lobby. She made it to the big glass doors. She pushed out into the night air, and she gulped it down like she'd been drowning. And behind her in the ballroom, Daniel's voice rose up one more time, gleeful, vicious, playing to the crowd. Well, he said, that was a hell of a show. Rented boyfriend turns out to be a billionaire. You can't write this stuff. Emma always did have a flair for the dramatic. And that was when Ryan Walker turned around and walked straight up to Daniel Price, and the entire ballroom held its breath because there was something in the billionaire's face now that had not been there all night, something cold and absolutely controlled. And Daniel's smug grin flickered and died as Ryan stopped 6 inches away from him and spoke in a voice pitched low enough that the crowd had to strain to hear it. You've said her name 4 times tonight, Ryan said. You're going to want to make this the last one. Daniel tried to laugh. It came out wrong. Is that a threat from the sensitive billionaire? You gonna buy my company, ruin me? Go ahead, tough guy. No, Ryan said. I'm not going to do anything to you. That's the part you can't understand, isn't it? I don't have to. Because in about 10 minutes, every person in this room is going to remember exactly one thing about tonight, and it's not going to be me. It's not going to be my company or my money or any of it. He leaned in just slightly. They're going to remember that a woman you spent 2 years telling was unlovable, walked into this room, danced in front of every one of you, and left with more dignity than you've had in your entire life. That's what they'll remember, Daniel. And every time they look at you from now on, they're going to think about the man who was so afraid of being nothing that he had to spend a whole party trying to make her feel like less. He straightened up. You didn't lose her tonight. You lost her 3 years ago when you were too small to keep her. Tonight everybody just found out. And Ryan Walker turned his back on Daniel Price, and he walked out of that ballroom past the staring crowd, past the whispering ants, past Chloe with her white face, and Preston with his open mouth, and he went out through the big glass doors into the night to find Emma. But when he got to the parking lot, she was gone. He stood there under the lights turning in a slow circle, and there was no blue dress. No Emma, nothing but the valet stand and a row of parked cars and the cold night pressing in. She'd taken a cab, or called a friend, or walked. She was gone, and she'd left him standing there, and Ryan Walker, a man who had closed billion-dollar deals, a man who had built an empire out of nothing, a man who had spent the last 3 years believing there was nothing left in the world that could hurt him, because the worst thing had already happened, stood alone in a parking lot and felt his heart break for only the 2nd time in his life. He pulled out his phone. He found her name. He typed a message, deleted it, typed another. Then he stopped, because he understood standing there that a text wasn't going to fix this, that "I can explain" wasn't going to fix this. That everything he'd spent 3 years learning about hiding, about disappearing, about controlling the story. None of it was worth anything now, because the one person he'd let see the real him was the one person he'd lied to about who that real him was. He put the phone away. And somewhere across the city in the back of a cab, Emma Collins pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the lights go by, and she thought about a man in a diner who told her that her ex was a coward, that the problem was never her, that she'd been handing her worth to people determined to spend it. He'd been right about all of it, and he'd been lying the whole time, and she didn't know how both of those could be true, but they were, and she cried the whole way home. Not the good kind of tears this time, but the old kind, the kind she thought she'd finally left behind in that ballroom. The cab pulled up to her building. She paid the driver. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, and she let herself in, and she stood in the dark for a long moment without turning on the lights. Then she took off the beautiful blue dress, and she hung it carefully in the closet, and she sat down on the edge of her bed with her phone in her hands. There were 14 missed calls, all from Ryan. And one text sent 20 minutes ago that just said, "You were right. I should have told you. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me tonight. I just need you to know one thing, and then I'll leave you alone as long as you want. Everything I said about you was true. Every word. The lie was only ever about me. Never about you. R." Emma read it 4 times. Then she put the phone face down on the nightstand, and she lay back on her bed in the dark, and she stared up at the ceiling exactly the way she had 3 nights ago when the whole impossible thing had started. Except now, there was a hole in her chest where something warm had been for one single evening, and she didn't know how to fill it back up, and she didn't know if she wanted to, and she didn't know for the first time in her life, she truly did not know whether the smartest thing she could do was run as far from Ryan Walker as she could get, or whether she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life by walking out that door. The phone buzzed once more on the nightstand. She didn't look at it. Not yet. The phone buzzed a second time, then a third, and Emma finally reached over and turned it all the way off. Not because she didn't want to talk to him. That was the part that frightened her. She turned it off precisely because part of her did want to talk to him, wanted it so badly it scared her, and she didn't trust herself at midnight with a broken heart and 14 missed calls to make a decision she'd have to live with. So she slept, or tried to. And in the morning, she woke up to a world that had already decided the story for her. It was Chloe who called first at 8:15, and Emma answered before she was fully awake. Emma, are you okay? Oh my God, are you seeing this? Seeing what? It's everywhere. Emma, it's everywhere. Somebody filmed it. Somebody at the party filmed the whole thing, the whole with Ryan and Daniel and you walking out, and it's M. It has like 200,000 views already, and it's not even 9 in the morning. Emma sat up fast. What? Billionaire defends mystery woman at engagement party. That's what they're calling it. There's a whole thread. People are trying to figure out who you are. Somebody already tagged Walker Systems. The comments, you have to see the comments, people are. I don't want to see the comments, Emma said. But she was already reaching for her laptop, already opening it, already feeling that sick pull of a person about to look at the thing that will hurt them. Emma, wait before you. But she'd already found it. The video was shaky, filmed on someone's phone from maybe 20 feet away, but the audio was clear enough. There she was. There was Ryan taking her hand. There was Daniel laughing and Ryan's voice quiet and cold, telling him he'd want to make that the last time he said her name. There was the whole thing, her accusation, his confession. Because you're the first thing that's felt real to me in 3 years. Her walking out with her head up. And there were the comments. She braced for the cruelty. 30 years of training had taught her exactly what to expect. The fat jokes, the disbelief, the sneering certainty that a woman who looked like her could never really have earned a moment like that. And some of it was there. Of course, some of it was there. But that wasn't what she found. What she found scrolling with her heart in her throat was thousands of people she'd never met in cities she'd never been to, defending her, fighting for her. A woman in Ohio wrote that she'd cried watching Emma walk out with her head up, that she'd never had the courage to do that with her own family. A man in Arizona wrote 3 paragraphs about his sister, who'd been treated the same way her whole life, and how he wished someone had stood up for her the way Ryan stood up for Emma. Comment after comment after comment from strangers, all saying versions of the same thing I see her. She matters. That man Daniel is a coward. That woman is beautiful. Emma sat on the edge of her bed and cried for the second time in 12 hours, except this time she couldn't have told you exactly why. Chloe's voice was small on the phone. Are you there? I'm here. I need to tell you something. Chloe took a breath. I need to tell you I'm sorry. And I don't mean about the video. I mean Emma. I mean about our whole lives. I watched that video like 40 times last night and I kept waiting to see myself in it. To see myself standing up for you. And I wasn't there. Nobody in our family was there. It took a stranger. It took a man you met 3 days ago to do the thing that I, your own sister, have never once done." Her voice broke. "How long have they been talking to you like that, Em? How long have I been sitting there letting them and telling myself it was just how Mom is, just how Aunt Patricia is, just how long?" Emma closed her eyes. "My whole life, Chloe." "I'm so sorry." "I know." "No, Chloe was crying now too. "I'm not saying it to make myself feel better. I'm saying it because I saw it. Last night I finally saw it, and I can't unsee it, and I don't want to be a person who sees it and does nothing. So whatever happens with this Ryan thing, whatever you decide, I'm on your side now. Actually on it. Not just saying it, I promise you. And that was worth something." In the wreckage of the whole disaster, that was worth something real, because Emma had spent 30 years waiting for one member of her family to say those words, and now, in the strangest possible way, one of them finally had. "Thank you," Emma whispered. They talked for another few minutes, and just before they hung up, Chloe said carefully, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you love him?" Emma didn't answer right away. "I knew him for 3 days," she said finally. "You can't love someone in 3 days." "That's not what I asked." And Emma sat there in the quiet, and she thought about a man in a diner turning his coffee cup slowly on the table, telling her that her ex was a coward. She thought about a hand on her waist on a dance floor, a voice saying, "Look at me, just me. We're the only 2 people in this room." She thought about 14 missed calls, and a text that said the lie was only ever about me, never about you. "I don't know," she said. "And even if I did, Chloe, he lied to me. From the first minute. I can't just—" "I know," Chloe said gently. "I'm not telling you what to do. I just wanted to know if it was real. Because if it was real, Em, that's rare. That's really rare. I know because I've got a wonderful fiancé and I love him. But I watched that video, and the way that man looked at you, Preston, has never once looked at me like that." She laughed a little wetly. "Don't tell him I said that." They hung up. And Emma sat with her cold laptop and her hot face and a heart that felt like it was being pulled in 2 directions at once. She spent the day trying not to think about him. She failed. By afternoon, she'd turned her phone back on because avoiding it felt like cowardice, and cowardice was Daniel's specialty, not hers, not anymore. And the moment it powered up, the messages flooded in Chloe. 3 coworkers who'd seen the video. A college friend she hadn't spoken to in years. And at the bottom of all of it, one more from Ryan sent that morning. "I meant what I said. I'll leave you alone as long as you need. But I want you to know I'm not disappearing. I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Take all the time you want. R." She read it, and she didn't answer it, and she hated how much she wanted to. 2 days passed like that. Then 3. And on the 4th day, everything got worse, because that was the day the story stopped being about Emma and started being about Ryan Walker and about the men who'd spent 3 years running his company and did not want him to come back. Emma found out the way half the country found out. It was a headline, and then it was everywhere. Walker Systems Board moves to formally remove founder amid erratic public behavior. She read the article standing in her kitchen, and her stomach turned over. The board of Walker Systems, it said, had scheduled an emergency vote. The official language was careful and cruel. It cited Ryan's 3-year absence. It cited concerns about the founder's stability and fitness to lead. And it quoted an unnamed source close to the board, describing the viral video. The video of Ryan defending Emma as evidence of a man who had lost his judgment and become a reputational liability. There was a photo of a man named Gerald Voss, the board chairman, a silver-haired man with a politician's smile, who was quoted saying the company needed to move forward with mature, stable leadership, and that Mr. Walker's recent conduct speaks for itself. They were using her. That was what Emma understood reading it a second time with her hands going cold. They were using the video the moment Ryan had stood up for her, the single most decent thing she'd ever witnessed, and they were twisting it into proof that he was unfit. A man defends a woman from a bully at a party, and a room full of executives calls it erratic, calls it a liability, uses it as the excuse to take his company away. And it was her fault. If she hadn't posted that ad, if she hadn't dragged him into her family's mess, if she hadn't walked out and made a scene that ended up on 100,000 phones, she'd handed his enemies the exact weapon they'd been waiting 3 years to find. She picked up her phone. She stared at his name. And for the first time in 4 days, she called him. He answered on the first ring. Emma. His voice was raw, like he hadn't slept. You called. I didn't think you'd... I saw the news, she said. About the board. About the vote. Ryan, they're using the video. They're using what you did for me to... I know. This is my fault. Stop. His voice was firm but not unkind. Emma, don't you dare. Don't you dare take that on. This has nothing to do with you. This has been coming for 3 years. Voss has wanted me out since the day I stepped back, and if it hadn't been the video, it would have been something else. He's just an opportunist who found a good excuse. That's all this is. He paused. But that's not why you called, or is it? I don't know why I called, Emma admitted. Okay. I'm still angry at you. You should be. I haven't forgiven you. I'm not asking you to. She pressed her hand to her forehead. I read that they're going to take your company. The company you built. From a garage, that man said. $4 billion, and they're going to take it from you and use me to do it. And I couldn't just sit here and not say anything. That's all. That's why I called. There was a silence on the line. Emma, Ryan said quietly. Can I tell you something? And then you can hang up if you want. Okay? I don't care about the company. She blinked. What? I built it, and I loved it, and I gave everything I had to it, but I built it back when I thought that was what mattered. Back before Sarah got sick. Back before I learned what actually matters. His voice was steady, certain. They can have it. Honestly, Emma, they can have it. And until 4 days ago, I would have told you I'd hand them the keys and walk away without looking back. But then I met you, he said, and I remembered what it felt like to want something again. And here's the thing I've been sitting with for 4 days ever since you walked out of that ballroom. It's not the company I don't want to lose. He took a breath. It's you. Emma closed her eyes. Ryan, you don't have to say anything. I know I don't have the right to say that yet. I lied to you, and I have to earn my way back from that, and I will however long it takes if you let me. But you called me, and you're the most honest person I've ever met, so I'm going to be honest back. That's the deal we had, right, from the diner. Honesty when it's hard. A pause. So there it is. Hardest thing I've got. I don't care about the company. I care about you. For a long moment, Emma couldn't speak. And then, because she was who she was, because 30 years of being underestimated had made her sharp in ways people never expected, she heard herself say something completely different from anything she'd planned. Then don't let them take it. What? Don't let them take your company. Her voice was gaining strength, now gaining an edge. Not because you care about the money, because of what they're doing. Ryan, they're standing up in front of the whole world and calling the best thing you've ever done standing up for someone who was being bullied. They're calling it a weakness. They're calling it erratic. They're telling 4,000 people who work for you and every person who watched that video that a man who defends someone is unfit to lead. And that's a lie. That's the same lie Daniel's been telling his whole life, that kindness is weakness and cruelty is strength. And I am so sick of that lie, Ryan. I am so sick of it. Her voice cracked. Don't let Gerald Voss win with it. Don't let him make what you did for me into the reason they take everything from you. Fight, not for the money, for the truth. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and when Ryan spoke again, his voice had changed. Something had come back into it, something Emma hadn't heard before, some old steel that had been buried under 3 years of grief. You know, he said slowly, When I stepped away from the company, everybody told me the same thing. They said, "Ryan, you're too soft now. You've lost your edge. A man who's grieving can't run a company like this." And I believed them. For 3 years I believed them. I thought Sarah dying had broken something in me that I could never get back. He paused. And then a woman I met 3 days ago just gave me the best argument for going back that anybody's made in 3 years. And she did it in about 90 seconds. Over the phone. While she was still angry at me. Despite everything, Emma almost smiled. "I'm still angry at you," she confirmed. "I know, and I'm going to earn my way out of that. But Emma..." His voice dropped. "Will you help me?" "Help you what?" "Fight. You said fight for the truth. Fine. But I've been gone 3 years. I don't know who's still loyal and who's been bought. I don't know the current numbers, the current politics. I've been living in a little house making dinner for my daughter, and I'm walking back into a war I don't have a map for." He paused. "But you, Emma, you're a marketing director. You built a whole department from nothing. You just took the ugliest thing that ever happened to you and turned it into 100,000 strangers standing up and cheering. You understand people. You understand story. And this whole fight, it's not about money or numbers, it's about story. It's about who gets to tell the truth about what that video means." A breath. "I need someone who understands people. And you're the best I've ever met." Emma stood in her kitchen phone pressed to her ear and felt something shift in her chest. 4 days ago, she'd been a woman who hired a fake boyfriend because she didn't have the courage to walk into a party alone. And now a billionaire was asking her to help him save his company. "That's insane," she said. "Probably. I don't know anything about running a technology company. You don't have to. You just have to help me tell the truth in a way people can't ignore. That's your whole job. That's the thing you're better at than anyone I've ever met. Ryan." Say yes, Emma. And here was the fork in the road. Emma could feel it, one of those rare moments where you can actually sense your whole life pivoting on a single word. She could say no. She could stay angry, stay safe, stay behind the wall she'd spent 30 years building. She could let Ryan Walker be a strange, painful 3-day chapter that she'd tell people about someday and shake her head over. Or she could say yes. "This doesn't mean I've forgiven you," she said. "Understood. This is business. This is me helping you because what they're doing is wrong, and because I hate that they're using me to do it. That's all this is." "That's all it is," he agreed, and she could hear that he didn't believe it any more than she did. "Okay," Emma said. Her heart was pounding. "Then here's the first thing you need to understand. You're thinking about this all wrong." "How so?" "You're thinking you have to prove you're stable. You're thinking you have to walk in there and convince them you've got your edge back, that you're the ruthless guy you used to be, that grief didn't break you." She was pacing now, her mind moving fast, the old marketing instincts coming alive. "That's a losing game, Ryan. If you play the game on their terms, who's tougher, who's harder, who's more of a killer, then you're just Daniel in a nicer suit, and they'll always be able to paint you as the guy who went soft. You'll lose. So what do I do?" "You do the opposite." Emma stopped pacing. "You don't hide from the video. You don't apologize for it. You don't pretend you're the old ruthless Ryan. You walk in there and you tell them the truth. You tell them, yes, I stepped away because my wife died and it broke my heart. And yes, I stood up for a woman being bullied at a party. And if that makes me unfit to lead, then you'd better fire every decent person in this building. You make the thing they're calling a weakness into the whole point. You make Gerald Voss stand up in front of everyone and argue that kindness is disqualifying. And you let the whole world watch him do it." There was silence on the line. "Ryan," she said. "Are you there?" "Emma," he said, and his voice was strange, almost awed. "Do you have any idea how good you just were?" 3 years. 3 years I've had lawyers and consultants and crisis managers telling me how to handle this board. And not one of them, not a single one ever said what you just said. Because they're all playing the same game Voss is playing. And you just walked in from the outside and saw the whole board in one move." He laughed a real laugh, the first she'd heard from him since the ballroom. "Emma Collins, You are something else. You are really something else. And Emma, standing in her kitchen, still angry, still hurt, still tangled up in a mess she never asked for, felt her face go warm and felt underneath all the anger and the hurt something that was unmistakably, terrifyingly like hope. "When's the vote?" she asked. 9 days. Then we've got 9 days. She grabbed a notepad off her counter. Tell me everything. Tell me about Voss. Tell me about the board. Tell me who might still be loyal to you. And Ryan. Yeah, I want to be clear about one thing before we start. She gripped the pen. I'm not doing this because of you. I'm doing this because I spent my whole life being told that the soft parts of me, the kind parts, the parts that feel too much, I was told those were my weaknesses, that they made me less. And I'm done believing that. So I'm going to help you prove that the exact thing they're calling your weakness is actually the best thing about you. And I'm going to do it because if it's true for you, then maybe it's been true for me this whole time too. You understand? There was a pause. Yeah, Ryan said softly. I understand. I understand better than you know. They talked for 3 hours that night. And somewhere in the middle of it, somewhere between the org charts and the shareholder breakdowns and the long list of people who might still be loyal, Emma forgot to be angry. Not entirely. The hurt was still there underneath a bruise she pressed on now and then to make sure it still ached. But for 3 hours, she was just Emma and he was just Ryan, and they were two people leaning over a problem together, and it felt so natural, so easy. So much like the diner that she had to keep reminding herself it wasn't the diner, that everything was different now that he'd lied. But he'd also called it a war he didn't have a map for, and she was the map. And nobody in her whole life had ever needed her map before. They agreed to meet in person the next day. Neutral ground. Emma insisted not his place, not hers. A conference room she borrowed from a friend's office downtown. And when she walked in the next morning, she stopped dead in the doorway because Ryan Walker was already there sitting at the table, and he wasn't wearing the canvas jacket or the nice suit from the party. He was wearing a plain gray sweater and jeans, and he had dark circles under his eyes, and spread across the table in front of him were files and folders and a laptop. And beside all of it, incongruous and small, sat a paper lunch bag with a child's drawing of a dinosaur taped to the side. He saw her looking. "Lily made me lunch," he said a little sheepishly. She found out I was going into a meeting to save Daddy's company, and she got very serious about it, and she made me a sandwich and drew me a T-Rex for courage. I couldn't leave it in the car. Felt like bad luck. And Emma stood in this doorway, and she looked at the most eligible billionaire in the country, sitting behind a paper lunch bag with a 7-year-old's dinosaur drawing taped to it, and something in her chest that had been clenched tight for 4 days finally quietly came loose. "Can I meet her someday?" she heard herself ask. "Lily, can I meet her?" Ryan looked up, and something moved across his face. Surprise and hope and a careful, fragile joy. "She'd like that," he said. "She's been asking about you, actually, ever since the video. She keeps calling you the pretty lady who Daddy was brave for." Emma's throat tightened. "She's got it backwards," she said. "I'm the one you were brave for." "No." Ryan shook his head. "She's got it exactly right. Emma, I wasn't brave until I met you. I was hiding. For 3 years I was hiding. You're the reason I stopped." He gestured at the files, the laptop, the dinosaur lunch bag. "You're the reason I'm sitting here at all." For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Emma set down her bag, and she pulled out a chair, and she sat down across from him, and she picked up the first file. "Okay," she said. "Let's save your company, and then—" She looked up at him, and she let a little of the wall down, just a little, just enough. "And then we'll talk about the rest of it, about us, about whether there's an us, but the company first." "The company first," Ryan agreed. And they got to work. The next 9 days were the strangest, most exhilarating of Emma's life. They worked. God, how they worked. Long nights in the borrowed conference room, cold coffee and takeout containers piling up, Emma at the whiteboard, mapping out the story, Ryan on the phone, reconnecting with the people who'd stayed loyal. She learned things about him she never would have guessed: that he had a mind like a steel trap when he stopped grieving long enough to use it, that he remembered the name of every janitor and receptionist at his company. Even 3 years later, that the loyalty he'd inspired ran deeper than Voss could possibly have known. Because that was the thing they discovered working late into those 9 nights. Gerald Voss thought Ryan was a soft man who'd gone away and left a vacuum. But when Ryan started making calls, something remarkable happened. The engineering team he'd built from scratch, they still loved him. The early employees, the ones who'd been there since the garage, they'd been miserable under Voss, who'd turned the place cold and political and cruel. There was a whole quiet resistance inside Walker Systems that had been waiting 3 years for their founder to come home, and they hadn't even known they were waiting until he called. They remember. Ryan said one night, wonder in his voice, hanging up from a 2-hour call with his old head of engineering. "Emma, they remember who we used to be. Before Voss. Voss thinks he's got the board locked up, and maybe he does. But the people, the actual people who build the thing, they're with me. They've been with me the whole time." "Then that's the story," Emma said. "That's the whole story. Voss has the board, you have the people, and in 9 days we're going to make sure the whole world knows the difference." But it wasn't going to be that simple, because on the 7th day, 3 days before the vote, Emma's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize, and she answered it, and a smooth, cultured voice she'd never heard before said, "Miss Collins." "Emma Collins. My name is Gerald Voss. I was hoping we might have a little conversation, just the two of us. I think you'll find it very much worth your while." And Emma's blood ran cold, because Gerald Voss should not have had her number. Gerald Voss should not have known who she was, not by name, not by phone. The whole point of the mystery woman in the video was that nobody knew who she was, which meant someone had told him, which meant someone close to Ryan. Someone in those 9 days of late-night calls and reconnected loyalties, someone had sold her name to the enemy. "How did you get this number?" Emma said, and her voice was steadier than she felt. "Oh, Miss Collins." Voss's voice was warm, amused, and utterly chillingly calm. "You'd be amazed what people will tell you when they think their own future is on the line. But that's not important right now. What's important is that I have a proposal for you, a very generous one. And I'd strongly advise you to hear me out before you decide to hang up, because it concerns something you posted online about 3 weeks ago. An advertisement. For a, what did you call it? A fake boyfriend. For $200. A pause, and Emma could hear the smile in it, cold and patient and sure. "I have a copy. And I don't think Ryan Walker's 4,000 employees or the good people of the financial press would react quite so warmly to their heroic returning founder if they knew the truth about how he met his lovely mystery woman. Do you?" Emma's hand went numb around the phone. "Now," said Gerald Voss. "Shall we talk?" Emma stood in her kitchen with the phone pressed to her ear, and for one long moment the old fear rose up in her like a tide. The fear of exposure, of humiliation, of being seen as the pathetic woman who'd been so desperate she'd bought a date online. And then something happened that surprised even her. The fear crested, and it broke. And underneath it, where she'd expected to find shame, she found something else entirely. She found that she wasn't ashamed anymore. "Mr. Voss," Emma said, and her voice came out clear and calm. "Let me make sure I understand what you're telling me. You're threatening to release the fact that I posted an ad for a fake date. You think that's going to embarrass me. You think that's the thing that's going to make me help you take Ryan's company. I think," Voss said smoothly, "that a woman in your position would prefer to keep certain things private. And I think a man like Ryan Walker, whatever affection he claims to have for you, will not thank you when the whole world learns that his triumphant return was built on a woman who bought him off the internet. It's tawdry, Miss Collins. It makes him look foolish, and it makes you look well. I'm sure you can imagine how it makes you look. So here's my very reasonable offer. 3 days from now, before the vote, you'll release a statement. A simple one. You'll say that Ryan misled you, that you feel used, that you've come to have concerns about his stability, just like the board does. And in exchange, that ad never sees the light of day, and I'll see that you're compensated for your trouble, very generously, a number that would change your life, Miss Collins." Emma was quiet for a moment. "You know what's funny, Mr. Voss?" she said. 3 weeks ago, that threat would have worked. 3 weeks ago, I was so ashamed of that ad, I could barely look at it myself. I posted it at 4 in the morning, crying in my kitchen because I was so terrified of walking into a room alone. And if you'd called me then and threatened to tell people about it, I'd have done anything you asked. Anything. Just to keep them from knowing how pathetic I was. Then we understand each. But here's what happened between then and now." Emma went on, and her voice was gathering heat. 100,000 strangers watched me walk out of that party with my head up. And they didn't laugh at me, Mr. Voss. They cheered. Women wrote to me about their own families. A man in Arizona wrote 3 paragraphs about his sister. And somewhere in the middle of reading all of that, I stopped being ashamed. So you go ahead. You release the ad. Tell the whole world that I was so lonely and so beaten down that I paid $200 for one night of dignity." Her voice cracked, but not with fear, with fury. "Because you know what that story actually is. Mr. Voss, it's not tawdry. It's the most human thing in the world. And every single person out there who's ever felt too broken to walk into a room alone is going to understand it completely. You think you have a weapon. You've got nothing. You've got a story about a lonely woman and a widowed man who found each other, and if you're stupid enough to release it, you're going to hand us the most sympathetic love story this country has seen in a decade." There was a silence on the line. When Voss spoke again, the warmth was gone. "You're making a mistake." "No," Emma said. "For the first time in my life, I'm not. Miss Collins, let me be very clear about your situation. You are a marketing director, a mid-level employee at a mid-sized firm. You have stumbled into something far, far larger than you understand, involving forces you cannot begin to comprehend, and you are about to be crushed by them. I'm offering you a way out. I strongly suggest—" "Mr. Voss." Emma's voice was steel now. "You called me a mid-level employee like it was an insult. Like being ordinary makes me nothing. That's the same thing my whole family always did. It's the same thing Daniel did. It's the exact same lie you're using on Ryan right now, that the ordinary, decent human things about a person make them weak. And I have spent 30 years believing that lie, and I am done. So here's my counteroffer. Release the ad. Do it. And I promise you, I will personally make sure the whole world knows that Gerald Voss was so afraid of losing a vote that he tried to blackmail a lonely woman with the most vulnerable moment of her life. That's your story, Mr. Voss, not mine, yours. Now I'm going to hang up." "Miss Collins." She hung up, and then she stood in her kitchen, shaking her heart, slamming against her ribs, half triumphant and half terrified, because she'd just told the chairman of a $4 billion company to do his worst, and she had absolutely no idea if she'd just saved Ryan or destroyed him. She had to tell him. That was the first thought. She had to tell him right now, because Voss had her number, which meant someone had betrayed them, which meant everything they'd built over the last 7 days had a crack running straight through the middle of it. She called Ryan. He answered on the second ring. "Emma. Everything okay? You sound—" "Voss called me." The line went dead silent. "He what?" "Gerald Voss just called my personal cell phone, Ryan. He knew my name. He knew about the ad. He has a copy of the ad. He tried to blackmail me into releasing a statement against you before the vote." Her words tumbled out fast. "And Ryan, he had my number. My personal number. The whole point was that nobody knew who I was. Somebody told him. Somebody close to us in the last 7 days sold my name to Gerald Voss." She heard Ryan exhale slowly. "What did you tell him?" he asked. "I told him to do his worst." Her voice trembled. "I told him if he released the ad, I'd make sure everyone knew he blackmailed a lonely woman to win a vote. Ryan, I don't know if that was the right. I might have just made everything worse. I might have—" "Emma." handed him a reason to burn the whole thing down, and it's my fault. It's all my. Emma, stop. His voice was firm and warm at the same time. Listen to me. You just did the single bravest thing I've ever heard of. A man with $4 billion and a whole board behind him threatened you, and you told him to go to hell. Do you understand how few people on this earth would do that? Do you understand what you just protected? I protected you. You protected the truth. And you protected yourself, which is the part I'm most proud of, because 3 weeks ago you told me you'd have done anything to keep people from seeing that ad. And just now you looked the most dangerous man in this whole fight in the eye and told him you weren't ashamed of it anymore. His voice thickened. Emma, that's it. That's the whole thing. That's everything I've been trying to tell you since the diner. You just proved it to yourself. Emma pressed her hand to her mouth, and she didn't cry, but it was close. But somebody betrayed us, she said. Somebody gave him my number. Yeah. Ryan's voice hardened. Yeah, they did. And I think I know who. Who? Give me a few hours. He paused. Emma, can you come to the house? Tonight? I know I said neutral ground. I know that was the deal. But this changed things, and there are things I need to tell you that I can't say on a phone. And... He hesitated. And Lily's been asking to meet you. If tonight's too much, I understand. But I'd like you to come. I'd like you to see where I actually live. I think it's time you saw the real thing. And Emma, who had insisted for 7 days on neutral ground, who had held Ryan at arm's length through every late night in that conference room, heard herself say, "Text me the address." Ryan's house was not what she expected, which was exactly what she should have expected. It was small. A modest 2-story on a quiet street, the kind of house a schoolteacher might own, or a plumber, or a mid-level employee at a mid-sized firm. There was a bicycle with training wheels lying in the front yard, and a basketball hoop over the garage with the net half torn. Nothing about it said billionaire. Everything about it said father. Emma sat in her car for a full minute before she went to the door. Ryan opened it before she knocked, and behind him, peering around his legs with enormous, curious eyes, was a small girl in dinosaur pajamas with a wild tangle of hair. "You're the pretty lady," the girl announced. "The one Daddy was brave for." Emma's throat closed. "You must be Lily," she managed. "I made you a picture," Lily said, and thrust a piece of paper at her with the solemn urgency of a child who has been waiting all day. "It's you and Daddy and me, and it's a T. Rex, but the T-Rex is friendly. He's not going to eat anybody, he's just big." Emma took the drawing. 3 stick figures and an enormous green dinosaur, all of them smiling, all of them holding hands, even the T-Rex whose tiny arms had been carefully stretched to reach. And something about it. The 3 of them holding hands. The friendly monster, the fact that this child had drawn Emma into her family before Emma had even walked through the door, something about it undid her completely. "It's the best picture anyone's ever made me," Emma said, and her voice broke on the last word, and Lily beamed like she'd been handed the moon. They had dinner. Ryan actually cooked from scratch one of Sarah's recipes, and Emma watched him move around the small kitchen with a 7-year-old underfoot. And she thought about the man at the party, in the well-cut suit, the man the whole world was fighting over, and she understood that neither of those men was the real one. This was the real one, this kitchen, this child. This was who Ryan Walker actually was, and he'd been trying to show her from the very beginning in a diner in a canvas jacket, insisting on being paid exactly $200. After dinner, Lily was put to bed. Emma read her one dinosaur at Lily's insistence, and Lily fell asleep halfway through, and Ryan stood in the doorway watching, and something passed between the 2 adults that neither of them said out loud. Then they sat at the kitchen table, and Ryan told her the rest of it. "I know who betrayed us," he said. "It's Marcus." "Who's Marcus?" "Marcus Chen, my old CFO, one of the first people I called when we started this." Ryan's jaw was tight. "He was one of my earliest hires. I trusted him completely. He was at my wedding, Emma. He was a pallbearer at Sarah's funeral. And I spent this whole week thinking he was helping me, feeding him information, telling him our whole strategy. He pressed his hands flat against the table. And he's been reporting all of it to Voss the entire time. The number, the strategy, all of it. Voss has known every move we've planned before we made it. Emma felt sick. How do you know? Because I set a trap yesterday. I told 3 different people 3 different false details about our plan. Told Marcus one of them. And this afternoon, one of my loyal engineers overheard Voss's assistant repeating Marcus's exact false detail back to another board member. Ryan's voice was low and pained. It's him. It's been him the whole time. Ryan, I'm so sorry. You know what the worst part is? He looked up and his eyes were bright with something that wasn't quite anger, something closer to grief. It's not that we lost our inside track. It's that I trusted him. I let one of the few people I had left all the way in, and he sold me out to Voss for I don't even know what. A bigger office, a board seat, money he doesn't need. He shook his head. This is why I disappeared, Emma. This is exactly why. Because in that world, everybody's Marcus. Everybody's got a price. And I got so tired of finding out what everyone's price was that I just left. I took Lily and I left, and I told myself I was never going back. Emma reached across the table and put her hand over his. It was the first time she'd touched him since the dance floor. She felt him go still. You're going back, she said quietly. Not because you have to, because you know something now that you didn't know 3 weeks ago. What's that? That not everybody has a price. She held his eyes. I didn't. Voss offered me a number that would change my life, and I hung up on him. Your engineers didn't. They waited 3 years for you. Lily doesn't. She squeezed his hand. You spent 3 years believing the world was all Marcus's and Voss's and Daniel's. And maybe a lot of it is, but not all of it. And the way you beat the Marcuses isn't by becoming one. It's by proving there are still people who can't be bought, starting with you. Ryan looked at her for a long time. How do you do that? He said softly. Do what? Just say the exact thing, every time. The thing I need to hear that I can't say to myself. He turned his hand over under hers, so their palms met, so their fingers laced together. Emma, I have to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish, before you say anything. Okay? Her heart began to pound. Okay, she whispered. When I answered your ad, it was because I understood it. That's true. All of that's true. I thought I was doing a kind thing for a stranger. One night, help a woman hold her head up, feel good about myself, go home. He took a breath. And then I sat down across from you in that diner, and you told me the ugliest thing about yourself, like it was nothing like you'd already decided I was safe. And you asked me what I was carrying, and nobody? Emma, nobody had asked me that in 3 years. Everybody knew what I was carrying. It was in the papers, but you didn't know, so you asked. And for the first time since Sarah died, I got to just tell someone, like a person. And by the time you'd finished your second cup of coffee, I already knew I was in trouble. Because I wasn't doing a kind thing for a stranger anymore. I was sitting across from the first woman in 3 years who made me feel like I was still alive. Emma couldn't breathe. I lied to you about who I was, Ryan said, and I will regret the way that hurt you for the rest of my life. But I need you to understand the lie was never a strategy, Emma. It was fear. I was so afraid that the second you knew you'd look at me the way everyone looks at me, and I couldn't stand it. Because you were the one good, real, true thing that had happened to me in 3 years, and I was a coward, and I tried to keep it a little longer by hiding the one thing that would take it away. His voice was shaking now. So I'm going to say it plainly, and then you can do whatever you need to do. I'm in love with you. I think I've been in love with you since Rosie's, and I know we've known each other for 3 weeks, and I know 2 of those weeks I spent lying to you, and I know I have no right to say it. But you're sitting in my kitchen with my daughter's drawing in your purse, and I would rather tell you the truth and lose you than lie to keep you one more day. So there it is. That's the whole truth. That's everything I've got. The kitchen was completely silent. Emma sat there with her hand in his, and every wall she'd spent 30 years building was screaming at her to pull back to protect herself, to remember that he'd lied, that this was too fast, that women like her didn't get endings like this, that it was safer to stay small. And then she thought about a paper lunch bag with a dinosaur taped to the side. And she thought about 100,000 strangers cheering. And she thought about the moment on the phone with Voss, when the fear had crested and broken, and she'd found underneath it that she wasn't ashamed anymore. And she thought, I am so tired of being safe. Safe never made me happy. Safe just made me small. Ryan, she said. You don't have to. Ryan, let me finish now. She tightened her grip on his hand. You want to know the truth? Here's my truth. I was falling for you at Rosie's too. And when that man said your name at the party, when I found out who you were, part of what hurt so much wasn't just that you'd lied. It was that I thought it meant the whole thing was fake, that a man like you could never actually want a woman like me, so it had to be pity. It had to be a game because that's the story I've believed my whole life. Her eyes filled. And then you fought for me. And then you asked me to help you save your company. And then I met your daughter, and she'd already drawn me into her family, and you cooked me dinner in this tiny kitchen, and I realized the story. I believed my whole life is wrong. It's just wrong. Men like you do choose women like me. You're proof. You're sitting right here. Emma, I'm not done. She was crying now, but she was smiling too. I'm still scared. I want to be honest about that. 2 weeks of lies is a real thing, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But I've spent 30 years letting fear make my decisions, and it never once made me happy. So I'm going to do something different. She took a breath, the biggest, most terrifying breath of her life. I'm in love with you too, Ryan Walker. God help me. Billionaire, single dad, liar and all. I'm in love with you too. And Ryan Walker, the reclusive founder. The man worth $4 billion. The man half the country was fighting over. Put his head down on his own kitchen table and wept with relief, and Emma came around the table and put her arms around him. And for a long time, neither of them said anything at all. 2 days later, the morning of the vote arrived. They had a plan. It was Emma's plan refined over long nights, and now that they knew about Marcus, they'd turned his betrayal into a weapon. Because Voss thought he knew their strategy, Marcus had told him everything, which meant Voss had spent the last 2 days preparing to counter a strategy that Emma and Ryan had already abandoned. He thinks you're going to walk in and make an emotional appeal, Emma said, straightening Ryan's tie in the parking garage beneath the Walker Systems tower. He thinks you're going to talk about Sarah, about grief, about the video, and make it about feelings. Because that's what Marcus told him. That's the strategy we let Marcus hear. And instead, you walk in there with numbers. Emma smiled fierce and bright. The engineers, the early employees, the productivity reports from Voss's 3 years versus yours, the attrition rates, the projects that died under him. You don't make an emotional appeal, Ryan. You make a business case. You prove with cold, hard data that the company has been dying under Gerald Voss, and that the people who actually build things have been begging for you to come home. You beat him at his own game, and you do it with the exact facts he thought you were too soft to bring. Ryan looked at her. And the video, he said. The kindness thing, I thought that was the whole play. It is. Emma's smile widened. But it's the closer, not the opener. You open with the numbers so they can't call you soft. And then once you've won on the facts, then you look them in the eye and you tell them the truth about the video. You tell them, yes, I stood up for a woman being bullied, and if this board thinks that disqualifies me, then this board has forgotten what it's building and who it's building it for. You make them choose on the record between a founder who defends people and a chairman who blackmails them. She reached up and smoothed his lapel. Because we have one more card, Ryan, and it's the one Voss doesn't know we have. The blackmail. The blackmail. Emma's eyes were steel. He called me. He threatened me. He tried to buy my silence, and he doesn't know that I recorded the whole thing. Ryan stared at her. You recorded it. I'm a marketing director, Ryan. I record everything. It's a reflex. She patted his chest. Gerald Voss stood up in front of this whole board and told them Ryan Walker was unstable and unfit. And in about 20 minutes, they're going to hear a recording of that same man trying to blackmail a lonely woman to win the vote. And then they're going to decide which one of you they actually think is unfit to lead. And Ryan Walker looked at the woman he'd met 3 weeks ago because of a $200 ad. The woman who'd walked out of a ballroom with her head up, who'd told the most dangerous man in his world to go to hell, who'd taken his daughter's drawing and put it in her purse and carried it here to the very center of the war. And he understood with total clarity that he was looking at the strongest person he had ever known. "Emma," he said, "whatever happens up there today, win or lose, I need you to know something." "What?" "Meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. And it started with $200 and a lie, and it turned into the truest thing in my whole life. And I don't care what that boardroom decides in the next hour because I already won. I won the day you answered my text and told me to meet you at a diner." Emma kissed him. Right there in the parking garage, quick and fierce, the first time she'd ever kissed him. "Then let's go win the rest of it too," she said. They walked to the elevator together. Ryan pressed the button for the top floor, where the board was already assembled, where Gerald Voss was waiting with a vote. He was certain he'd already won, where Marcus Chen sat believing his betrayal was still a secret. The elevator doors opened, and as they stepped inside, as the doors began to close, Emma's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down at it out of reflex. It was a text, from an unknown number. She opened it, and the blood drained from her face. "Ryan," she said. "Ryan, wait." But the elevator doors had already closed, and the car was already rising, carrying them both up toward the boardroom, and Emma stood frozen with the phone in her hand and the text on the screen. And Ryan turned to her and saw her expression and said, "Emma, what is it? What's wrong?" She turned the phone so he could see it. The text said, "I know what you recorded. Play it in that room, and I'll destroy more than his company. Ask Ryan about the real reason he left 3 years ago. Ask him what Voss has been holding over him this whole time." And Emma looked up at Ryan, at the man she'd just told she loved, and she saw something cross his face that she had never seen there before. Not guilt, not fear, but the particular gray stillness of a man watching a secret he'd buried for 3 years claw its way up out of the ground. "Ryan," she said very quietly as the elevator climbed. "What is he talking about? What does Voss have on you?" And Ryan. Walker closed his eyes. "There's one more thing I never told you," he said. "And I was going to. I swear to God I was going to. I just needed to win this first." The elevator kept rising. "Tell me now," Emma said. "Before those doors open. Whatever it is. Tell me now." The elevator kept climbing, and Ryan opened his eyes and he told her. "3 years ago, when Sarah was dying, I made a mistake," he said, and his voice was very low and very steady. The voice of a man who has finally decided to set down something he's been carrying too long. "Not a crime. I need you to hear that first. Not a crime. But a mistake that a man like Voss could dress up to look like one." "Tell me," Emma said. The numbers above the door kept climbing. 14. 15. When Sarah got sick, I stopped paying attention to the company. Completely. I was at the hospital every day, all day. And there was one quarter where some numbers got reported that weren't wrong exactly, but they were optimistic. Too optimistic. My finance team under Marcus smoothed some things over to keep the stock steady while I was gone, because they knew if the market found out the founder had disappeared, the whole thing could crater. He swallowed. I found out about it afterward, and instead of blowing the whistle on my own company in the middle of my wife dying, I let it get quietly corrected the next quarter. No one lost money, nothing collapsed. But there was a period where the books said something that wasn't quite true, and I knew about it, and I didn't report it. And Voss has the documents. He's had them for 3 years. That's the real reason I stepped away without a fight. That's what he's been holding over me. He looked at her. He told me if I ever tried to come back, he'd release it, and he'd make sure it looked like I orchestrated the whole thing to prop up my own stock while my wife was dying. And a story like that. Emma, it wouldn't matter that it wasn't true. It would follow me forever. It would follow Lily forever. 16, 17. Emma stared at him. That's why you really disappeared, she said slowly. It wasn't just grief, it was because he was blackmailing you. It was both. The grief was real. God, the grief was real. But yes, he gave me a choice 3 years ago: walk away quietly and keep my name or fight, and watch him turn me into a villain who exploited his dying wife for stock prices. And I was so broken, Emma, I couldn't fight anything. So I took Lily and I left, and I told myself I didn't care about the company anyway, and I let him have it. His jaw tightened. And I've spent 3 years letting a man like that win, because I was too tired and too sad and too afraid of what he'd do to Lily's father's name. The number above the door read 18, 2 floors to go. And now Marcus knows you told me about the recording. Emma said, her mind racing. So he's warning you if you play my recording of Voss's blackmail, Voss plays his documents about the quarter and its mutual destruction. Yes. So we can't use the recording. No. Ryan's shoulders sagged. We can't. The second we do, he burns me down and it splashes onto Lily, and I can't? Emma, I can't do that to her. I'd rather lose the company 100 times. The elevator slowed. 19. And Emma Collins, the marketing director, the mid-level employee, the woman who understood people and story better than anyone Ryan had ever met, stood in that rising elevator with a phone in her hand and a monster waiting at the top, and she did the thing she'd been born to do. She saw the whole board in one move. No, she said. Emma, no, listen to me, fast. We've got maybe 15 seconds. She grabbed his arm. You've been thinking about this backwards for 3 years. You've been treating that quarter like a weakness he can exploit. It's not. Not anymore. Not if we tell it first. What? Ryan, the only power that story has is that it's a secret. The only reason Voss can hurt you with it is that you've been hiding it. So we don't hide it. Her eyes were blazing now. You walk into that room, and before Voss can say a single word, you tell the whole board the truth. The whole truth. You say 3 years ago, while my wife was dying, my finance team made an optimistic error to protect the company. I found out I had it corrected, no one was harmed, and I have regretted staying silent every day since. And then you say, and Gerald Voss has been using that mistake to blackmail me into staying away from my own company for 3 years. You take the bomb out of his hands, and you set it off yourself on your own terms framed your way. And a man who confesses his own mistake looks 1,000 times more fit to lead than a man who spent 3 years using it as a weapon. The elevator was slowing to a stop. The number read 20. You want me to confess? Ryan breathed. In front of the whole board, on the record. I want you to tell the truth before the man who's been weaponizing it can. Emma gripped both his arms now. Ryan? This is the exact same thing as the ad. Don't you see Voss thinks your secret is your shame the same way I thought my ad was my shame? And the second you stop being ashamed of it, the second you say it out loud, yourself plainly without flinching, it stops being a weapon and it becomes the bravest thing in the room. I know this works. I did it 2 days ago on the phone with him. Trust me. Trust me the way I trusted you when I walked into that party. Tell the truth first. The doors began to open, and Ryan Walker looked at the woman in front of him, and Emma watched 3 years of fear drain out of his face, and something else come into it. Something clean and terrifying and free. Okay, he said. Okay. Truth first. Truth first, Emma said. And Ryan, I'm coming in with you. All the way in. No more neutral ground. The doors opened all the way. The boardroom was full. 12 directors around a long table, and at the head of it sat Gerald Voss, silver-haired and smiling, that politicians smile, and beside him, unable to meet Ryan's eyes, sat Marcus Chen. And down the length of the table, standing along the walls, where they had no assigned seats, but had come anyway, stood a dozen of Ryan's engineers and early employees. The loyal ones, the ones who'd waited 3 years. The ones who had insisted on being in the room to see their founder come home. The moment Ryan stepped through the door, the room went silent. Gerald Voss rose smoothly to his feet. "Mr. Walker, this is a closed session, and I see you've brought a guest." His eyes flicked to Emma, cold and knowing, and Emma understood that this was the moment he expected to break her, the moment he expected the recording to come out so he could unleash his documents in return. "Miss Collins, isn't it? How nice. I do hope you're not planning anything you'll regret." And Ryan Walker walked to the head of the table past Voss and turned to face the entire board. And before Gerald Voss could say another word, he began to speak. "Before this vote happens," Ryan said, his voice ringing clear across the silent room, "there's something every person in this room needs to hear. And I'm going to say it myself right now because I'm done letting anyone hold it over me." Voss's smile faltered. "Mr. Walker, I don't think—" "3 years ago," Ryan said louder, riding right over him. "While my wife was dying of cancer, I stopped paying attention to this company. And during that time, my finance department reported a quarter more optimistically than the truth warranted. Nobody stole anything. Nobody lost money. It was corrected the next quarter. But it happened, and I knew about it after the fact. And I chose not to report it because I was sitting in a hospital watching my wife die, and I did not have it in me to blow up the company she'd watched me build. That was my decision. I own it. I have regretted my silence every single day since." He let it land. Then his voice dropped cold and precise. "And Gerald Voss has known about that quarter for 3 years. And for 3 years, he has used it to blackmail me. He told me that if I ever came back to this company, he would release those documents and tell the world that I faked earnings to protect my stock while my wife was dying. That is why I stepped away. Not grief. Blackmail. And I let him win because I was broken and because I was afraid of what that lie would do to my daughter." The room had gone absolutely still. Every head turned toward Gerald Voss. And Voss Emma watched it happen in real time. Voss reached for the only weapon he had left, the one he'd been so sure would work. "This is a fascinating story," Voss said, his voice tight, "and a desperate one, but it changes nothing about your fitness to lead. In fact, you've just confessed in front of this entire board to concealing a financial irregularity. I'd say that rather makes my case for me." He turned to the directors, spreading his hands. "You see, erratic, unstable, a man who conceals things. And I'd remind this board that Miss Collins here," his eyes cut to Emma, "met Mr. Walker under circumstances that are, shall we say, not what our returning hero would like the public to believe. Circumstances I have documented. So before anyone gets swept up in this performance, perhaps Miss Collins would like to explain how she and Mr. Walker actually—" "I hired him." Emma's voice cut across the room like a blade. Voss stopped. "I hired him," Emma said again, stepping forward into the center of the room, and her voice did not shake because she had made peace with this exact moment 2 days ago on the phone in her kitchen. "You want to tell them, Mr. Voss? Let me save you the trouble. 3 weeks ago, I posted an ad online. I offered $200 for a man to pretend to be my boyfriend for one night, because my family had spent my whole life making me feel worthless, and my ex-boyfriend had just told a room full of my relatives that no man would ever choose a woman my size, and I was so beaten down and so alone that I could not face walking into my own sister's engagement party by myself." She looked around the room at 12 stunned directors, at a dozen loyal engineers, and she did not flinch. "And Ryan Walker answered that ad. Not because he needed the money, because he read one line I wrote, 'Help me get through one night with my head held high,' and he understood it, because he knew exactly what it felt like to be judged before anyone knew his heart." She turned to face Gerald Voss directly. "That's your bombshell, Mr. Voss. That's the secret you've been so proud of. A lonely woman paid for one night of dignity, and instead, she found a man who saw her. Go ahead. Release it. Put it in every paper in the country, because I am not ashamed of it. I stopped being ashamed of it the day 100,000 strangers watched that video and stood up and cheered. So the only person in this room with anything to be ashamed of is you." Her voice dropped, and it filled the whole silent room. "Because 2 days ago, you called me on my personal phone, and you threatened to release that ad, and you offered to pay me to sign a false statement calling Ryan unfit. You tried to blackmail a lonely woman to win a vote, and I recorded every word of it." The room erupted in murmurs. Voss's face had gone white. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Emma held up her phone. "I'm a marketing director, Mr. Voss. I record everything. It's a reflex." She looked at the board. "I'll play it for anyone on this board who wants to hear it. Every threat, every dollar he offered me, in his own voice. The chairman of this company trying to blackmail a stranger 2 days before the vote he told you was about Ryan's stability." And then Ryan spoke quietly into the stunned silence. "Here's what this board has to decide," he said. "You have 2 men in front of you. One of them made a mistake 3 years ago while his wife was dying and just stood up in front of all of you and confessed it and asked for nothing but the chance to earn back what he built. The other one has spent 3 years using that mistake as a weapon, blackmailed the founder into exile, and 2 days ago tried to blackmail an innocent woman to hold on to his own power." He looked slowly around the table. "Gerald Voss told you I was unfit to lead because I stood up for someone at a party. So decide. Which of these 2 men do you actually want running this company? The one who defends people or the one who preys on them?" For a long moment, nobody moved. And then one of the engineers, standing along the wall, a woman with gray at her temples, one of the earliest hires, someone who'd been there since the garage, began to clap. Slowly, deliberately, and then the engineer beside her joined in, and then another, and then one by one the directors around the table, the ones who had been miserable under Voss, the ones who had watched the company grow cold and cruel and political, the ones who had been waiting 3 years for a reason to do the right thing. The directors began to clap too. Gerald Voss stood at the head of the table, and he watched his own board turn away from him, and he understood at last that he had lost. The vote was not close. When it was over, Gerald Voss was removed as chairman by the very board he'd been so sure he controlled. Marcus Chen resigned before they could ask for his resignation, and he left the room without looking at Ryan, without looking at anyone, carrying the particular emptiness of a man who has sold something he can never buy back. And Ryan Walker was reinstated as chief executive of the company he'd built from a garage by a unanimous vote with a dozen of his engineers cheering along the walls. But that isn't the end of the story, because the vote was never really what the story was about. Emma stood at the back of the room while it all happened, and she watched the man she loved take back the thing that had been stolen from him, and she understood that she'd had a hand in it, that her map had led him home, that her instinct for people and story and truth had won a war that armies of lawyers and consultants had told him was unwinnable. And for the first time in her entire life, Emma Collins looked at something she had done and did not shrink from it, did not diminish it, did not hand it to someone else. She stood in the back of that boardroom, and she let herself feel all the way down that she was extraordinary. It had taken 30 years and a $200 ad, but she finally believed it. Afterward, in the quiet of the emptied boardroom, Ryan came to her. The engineers had gone. The directors had gone. Voss had gone. It was just the 2 of them, standing where a war had just been won, and Ryan took both her hands in his. "You did that," he said. "You know that, right? Every part of it. You walked into a world you'd never seen, and you beat men who've been doing this their whole lives, and you did it in 3 weeks. "We did it," Emma said. "No." Ryan shook his head. "I want you to take this one, Emma. All the way. Don't hand it back. Don't make it smaller. You did that. Say it." And Emma looked at him and her eyes filled, and she said, "I did that." "Yeah," Ryan said softly. "You did." The months that followed changed Emma's life, but not in the ways the tabloids assumed. They assumed it was the money. They ran their headlines, the reclusive billionaire and the mystery woman, the fairy tale, the Cinderella story, and they got it completely wrong because they were the same kind of people who'd always looked at Emma and seen only the surface. They thought the story was that a poor, lonely woman had won a rich man. They never understood that the money was the least interesting thing about any of it. What actually changed was Emma. She did not quit her job to become a billionaire's wife the way the tabloids expected. She kept working because she loved her work and because she'd built her department from nothing, and she wasn't about to abandon it now that she finally believed she deserved it. Ryan never once asked her to shrink her life to fit inside his. He did the opposite. He came to her marketing awards and sat in the back and clapped louder than anyone. He asked her opinion on company decisions because he'd learned in 3 weeks that she saw things nobody else saw. He built his life bigger to make room for her, and she built hers bigger to make room for him, and neither of them ever asked the other to become smaller. And Lily. Emma had worried about Lily. She'd worried that a 7-year-old who'd lost her mother would resent the woman moving into her father's life. But Lily had drawn Emma into the family before Emma had even walked through the door, and Lily did not do things halfway. She taught Emma the names of 40 dinosaurs. She insisted Emma be the one to read the bedtime stories on the nights Ryan traveled. And one evening, about 6 months in, Lily climbed into Emma's lap without being asked, and rested her head against Emma's chest and said sleepily, "I'm glad Daddy was brave for you, because then you came and now we're 3. And Emma held that little girl and understood that she had gotten something she'd stopped believing she would ever have. Not money, not a fairy tale, a family. A place where she belonged exactly as she was, with nothing to fix and nothing to apologize for and no space to make herself small. Her own family changed too, though more slowly. Chloe kept her promise. She was on Emma's side now, actually on it, and their relationship became something it had never been before, real and equal and warm. Their mother took longer. It was months before she could look at Emma without that old flick of the eyes, and even then it never fully went away, because some people are too invested in the story they've been telling to ever quite put it down. But Emma made her peace with that. She'd stopped needing her mother's approval the night she walked out of that ballroom with her head up. She visited when she wanted to, and left when she needed to, and she never again made herself smaller to fit inside anyone's low opinion of her. As for Daniel, Emma saw him exactly once more. It was at a coffee shop months later, by accident. He was thinner than she remembered, somehow diminished, and when he saw her, his whole face went through a complicated series of calculations, and Emma watched him try to decide whether to be charming or cruel or apologetic, and she realized watching him that she felt nothing at all. Not anger, not hurt, nothing. He was just a small man in a nice coat, exactly as Ryan had said, and he had no power over her because she had stopped handing it to him. "Emma," he said, approaching her table. "You look wow. You look incredible. I've been meaning to." "Daniel," she said pleasantly, "it's good to see you. I hope you're well." And that was all. She didn't gloat. She didn't lecture him. She didn't need to. She simply picked up her coffee and wished him well, and walked out and left him standing there, understanding finally that the woman he'd told no one would ever choose had become someone so far beyond him that she couldn't even be bothered to hate him anymore. That was the only victory Emma wanted over Daniel Price. She'd stopped needing him to lose. She'd finally fully won. A year to the day after the engagement party, Ryan took Emma back to Rosie's. The same cracked vinyl booths. The same coffee pot that never stopped. Dot was still there, older than Nixon, and she brought them coffee without being asked, and she gave Emma a wink that suggested she remembered exactly who these two people were, and exactly what had happened at that booth a year ago. They sat in the same back corner. And when the coffee was poured, Ryan reached into his jacket, and he set something down on the table between them. $200, in cash, the same as a year ago. Emma laughed. "Are you paying me back a year later?" "No." Ryan smiled, and there was something in his eyes she'd never quite seen before. Something nervous and hopeful and utterly certain all at once. "I'm reminding you that the best decision I ever made in my entire life started with $200 and a woman brave enough to ask for one night of dignity." And then he moved the $200 aside, and underneath it was a small velvet box. Emma stopped breathing. "Emma Collins," Ryan said, and his voice was rough with feeling. A year ago, you hired me to pretend to be the man who chose you. And somewhere between this diner and now, I stopped pretending. I've been the man who chooses you every single day, and I want to be that man for the rest of my life. Not because you need saving. You never needed saving. You saved yourself and you saved me while you were at it. But because a world that has you in it is the only world I ever want to live in. He opened the box. Marry me. Let Lily have the mother she picked out for herself before either of us was brave enough to admit what was happening. Marry me, and let's be three forever. And Emma Collins. The woman who'd spent 30 years being told no one would ever choose her. The woman who'd hidden behind oversized clothes and fake confidence. The woman who'd once been so beaten down, she'd bought a single night of dignity for $200. Emma Collins looked at the man across the table, and she did not shrink, and she did not doubt, and she did not for one single second believe she was anything less than exactly enough. Yes, she said. Of course it's yes. It was always going to be yes. They were married in the spring in a small ceremony with no press and no spectacle. And Lily was the flower girl and carried a bouquet with a small plastic dinosaur hidden in the center of it. And Chloe cried through the whole thing. And Dot from the diner was there seated in the second row like family because by then she was. And Emma standing at the front in a dress she'd chosen because it made her feel beautiful, and for no other reason, looked out at the small crowd of people who had learned to see her clearly, and she thought about the desperate woman who'd typed an ad at 4 a.m. in a cold kitchen a year and a half before, and she wished she could reach back through time and tell that woman what she knew now. That the problem was never her. That the right person doesn't make you feel worthy after you change the right person, helps you see you were worthy all along. That the smallest, most desperate decision of your life can turn out to be the doorway to everything. Emma Collins had spent 30 years believing she was the woman the world would always overlook. She had been wrong. She had never been the woman who wasn't chosen. She had only been the woman who hadn't yet learned that she was allowed to choose herself. And the day she finally did, the day she took a wine glass out of a cruel man's hand and stood up and refused to be small, that was the day her real life began. Everything after was just the world catching up to a truth she should have known all along. She was never too much. She was never not enough. She was exactly, extraordinarily, unapologetically herself. And that was more than enough. That was everything.